Welcome back to the Geometric View, episode 85, season 8. Starting off this brand new season, we're going to do a tribute to Wallace Thornhill, Wal Thornhill, the great cosmologist who perpetuated and brought into recognition, with the help of David Talbott, the electric universe and the Thunderbolts Project. So the 2022 Electromagnetic Universe World Expo was amazing. We'll be releasing the
link is in the
episodes
show notes
weekly
below
on this channel.
Let's get into the circuit.
The Geometric
We greatly
View.
appreciate your support. The best way to donate to us is on PayPal. Just send money directly to goldenscaling@gmail.com. Thank you very much.
So, like I say, I wanted to do a memorial podcast for Wal Thornhill, who I can start off by saying what, he meant to me. First of all, he was a very calm person, and I was extremely honored for him to follow me on ResearchGate. Of all the people out there that I would have liked to follow me on ResearchGate, he might have been the most important to me. I would have liked Eugene Bagashoff or Donald Scott or any of those guys to follow me as well, but at that time they didn't, and it meant a lot to me in that first phase of my research to get that kind of nod. I'm sad that I didn't get to work with him directly. I'm not really angry at anybody about it. It's just I wish he had reached out to me and said, "Hey, I really, like the direction you're going." But maybe he given, some assistance or some direction that would have been nice. But I think that he is clearly a giant in the plasma electromagnetic cosmology. More on the commentary side, he wasn't like Christian Birkeland or Irvin Langmuir. He doesn't have a prominence in that way, but he has the prominence of uh, knowing the pulse of where the mainstream was going to go next. He made so many positive predictions, particularly with the comet stuff. What they were going to see, what they were going to experience, and I thought was actually impressive. Not quite at a Velikovski level of impressive, but it was impressive nevertheless. His research, while not as strong as mine, he hit more people and he connected with them in such a natural way because of his personality type. He was very soft spoken. And he was he even from a distance, I could tell he had a magnanimity about his presence. It was a soft magnanimity. It wasn't extremely forceful, from what I could tell. He wasn't as dominant a presence as someone like a Monty or Dave Talbott, but you had to respect him. In fact, that's one of the reasons I was so irritated with Michael Shermer, is that he got to sit there with someone of a personality like Wal Thornhill and didn't have the good sense to shut up and listen. Is the guy saying something that might blow your mind about Proto Saturn or about gravity? And I will forever feel like he's a giant that I'm standing on the shoulders of, even though I didn't personally know him. And I cite his work, but it's not really his papers. I sometimes cite the book, Thunderbolts of the Gods, but I know that he continuously was searching for the truth. I gather he must have had some health issues towards the end, so that's probably why he was doing a lot less, and that's fine. Everybody has the right to pass on the torch at the appropriate time. So I know the EU community will be in a little bit of disarray, but things will work out okay, I think. And I am definitely happy to have had his work as a part of my life, um, i- up to this point, and that's what he meant to me personally.
Nice. Well, about 10 years ago was the first time I heard his voice. And it's it's got a quality to it, like you say. He's calm, cool, and collected, and yeah, just a solid individual. Just had his heart in the right place. He was looking for answers. I'm sure he found a few, because I believe that the theories that they propose are a hell of a lot better than what's out there now from the mainstream.
Yeah.
And he'll be missed. I mean, I'll miss him for sure. We don't get to hear that golden voice no more.
Yes,
Yeah,
he
he
did
was-
have a very nice voice. Him and Dave both.
Yeah.
Very, both of them, or at least my experience. I personally haven't been able to get into too much of his work, but his Thunderbolts Project videos, obviously, he was a magnanimous figure within that community. And, it is obviously what could be perceived as a negative, blow, or, kind of a downward time, at least for the EU community. But at the same time, though he will be missed, a lot of his work will always live on, and stuff like that. So it's not necessarily, especially if he had health issues, to be looked at as a negative thing necessarily. But, I think his work that he was able to do, and the voice that he was able to get out there to as many as he could for the time that he was here, there's definitely something to be said for that in itself.
Yeah, I think that all of us have different types of stars, and there's people like Elon Musk in the world who are fated. Because there's lots of people with Asperger's. There's lots of people who are smart. We've had an autistic fella on our channel who is a genius, but he comes from humble people like us. And but there's some people fated to do big things. I think that he is a humble version of a big person, or he's somehow a normal person who attained this minor celebrity, but D-list as it may be in the science community, it was a mountain to those of us who are in the counter culture looking at how can we make a difference, because he made a difference with just more or less some really good commentary, sometimes colorful commentary, and being, assisting with important projects like Sapphire. He was definitely involved in many different aspects in which he tried to, I think, bring awareness to a truer reality of the universe at large. He wasn't interested in the pretty wild stuff like Buddy, or even Michael Claridge. Some of those, very very wild ideas. He didn't believe in a real King Arthur or a real Atlantis. But he, I think, if presented with the evidence, and if the evidence was a little bit more solid, I think he's definitely aware that that stuff is there, that it could, make a big difference, and he would have looked at it more deeply. Don't see him as limited. I think that he was just born at a time when, his early years, his prime years of life, there was no internet. And then he achieved all his prominence in actually his golden years, and made a massive impact through the internet, through YouTube, and then releasing some of his best productivity really was after the YouTube channel began. A lot of the books and all that. So, I mean, I'm not discounting the early work, but most of the people, like myself, encountered him in his golden years and not in his prime years, with the Chronos publications and all of the things that were happening in the the 70s and the 80s. It was really the 90s forward that he was able to make more impact, and that's a tribute to the power of the internet when used correctly.
Yeah, I think
And
Sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean, I think that he's a man who probably, if he had been given that opportunity, if he was in his prime today, if he was a young man today in his 20s, the amount of things he could have gotten done would probably vastly exceed all the work that I mean, most of my work will go into the future. That's where it will have its impact. Whereas, his impact would be felt in the gravitas of his personality and the ease with which he explained. Not that he was right about everything. There are many, many examples and people who've keyed in and they've said, well, here's a problem with this thought or this thought or this thought. But I think ultimately a lot of his gravity theory will prove out to be pretty accurate. It's the most logical, basic. There are some things where it's clear there's not enough. It's not circular logic, but there's just not enough information. So it seems like he's going around the subject. But he also may have suffered from what all of us suffer from, which is you have a model in your head. How does it work exactly, and how do you put it into words for other people to understand it without sounding like you're a complete loon? And he managed to ride that line
Yeah,
and maintain a certain level of a professional standard without getting wild. He didn't pull any Nassim Harameins or anything like that. I think when you're in the alt stream, it's actually harder to do than people think, because think about it, most of the people that get minor notoriety and famous in our alt stream community, they have to be either outrageous or make outrageous and untrue claims. I mean, part of what makes Jimmy so popular is that he's made an outrageous claim about the Rashat. If he hadn't done that, he'd be half as popular or a lot less. And yeah, he's misled a lot of people, and I think that's highly unethical. Wall didn't do that. He made claims about Proto Saturn based on mytho-historical information and some common sense things about what we know about dwarf stars, such as it is right now, which is not a lot, because we don't have one sitting right next to us anymore. And he stood on the shoulders of Velikovski, which people, not just the POSs, but people in the mainstream community in general are going to call, standing on sand. But yet none of them could really get past the Velikovski conundrum. Like, if he's so wrong, then why was he so right? And Wald saw
yeah,
through that, and he was willing to put his reputation on the line for that. So
yeah. I
I
think
think that's impressive.
Yeah, I think belief, in times can be the ultimate enemy of knowing, and like many scientists that have come, before, their greatness might not be realized until
Oh, they're gone.
after they're gone. So,
Yeah.
and I think that might be what we find out with Mr. Thornhill.
Yeah, I think that he is, like I say, a giant, not in personality. He's not like me in terms of forceful and this is not his. It wasn't his style. But his reputation, even though it was in the dregs with the mainstream, I never heard anybody say anything about his personality and brought him down. They tried to bring down his ideas, and which sometimes they were successful and sometimes they weren't. It just depended on the real particular situation. The gravity thing was it's just an ongoing back and forth. Nobody knows. I mean, that's the thing is about it. It's like time. Nobody knows. And I think ultimately he will be proven in the main portion of his thoughts. I hope that he enjoyed reading my papers about proto Saturn and proto Jupiter coming from this larger star, and didn't see them as a threat. But I honestly don't know because I didn't know him personally. I feel like one time he hinted that he was leaning in that direction of something was changing everything. I remember hearing it was one of his final space news that he did. His voice was weak, and he said something about, it's going to change everything. And then we never heard anything more about what he was talking about. And I feel like he was reading my work and continuing with reading the plasma glyph papers and got through the finally addendum 2, and it was starting to dawn on him. But I have no idea because I'm not inside the inner circle whether or not there was some kind of like problem with actually going forward with that. But something had broken through, and they wanted me to do stuff with them. So perhaps we will, we will see. I don't know. Where do you guys think the community is going to go from here? I mean, in all honesty.
I mean, I've
I mean,
got
the
several different theories on it.
Thunderbolts Project. Where do you think specifically the Thunderbolts Project is going to go? Like, how do you think things are going to go for them?
Well, as far as the Thunderbolts guys are concerned, I'm not sure, how much, how much more they can actually present in terms of here's what we think, things are taking place. I mean, they've done a great job over the years of, bringing in some smart people to be able to present different concepts and ideas. So I'm not sure how much more can actually be done in terms, of relations to the heavens, because a lot of it's all, for the most part, and this is my opinion, it all comes down to the same concept, and it's the same issue that we face with a coastline paradox. It's the unit of measurements being utilized to make these observations at the time the observations are being made. So it's, we can go down to the smallest level with the Planck constant and say, okay, well, that's what we're sticking to, that's it. Or we can go to, the speed of light and say, okay, no, that's the baseline we're sticking to, and we do that for a long period of time until humanity moves forward and understands there's other ways or other methodologies. So I think we're seeing now examples being provided through this plasmoid unification model of which has recently come out. I think that's a great start. That'll connect back to the Sapphire guys and the research they've done there. I think the combination of all of that, I think, I don't say the development, but the rolling out of different AI mechanisms and engine learning devices that are being provided to the public now, in combination with this information and the baseline of, the plasmoid unification model, all these things will eventually lead to just ultimately a better understanding of the above and the below. And whether it's in, real-time understanding or it's, frozen in time observations for that particular, model that you're presenting in terms of whether it be mathematical or it's, biological or whatever. So I think ultimately that's where we'll see things progress. Individuals will start to understand more in terms of the world of which we live and the fact that, there's.
We could only hope.
We can only hope, yeah. There's obviously been a large amount of, I don't want to use the word deception and get into the whole, conspiracy theory crap and the individual controllers and all this, but there's been a large amount of delusions that have been swallowed hook, line, and sinker by the, the majority of the people. And then, the scientific community's been obviously corrupted by greed and ego. And those forces are very, very strong, especially the greed forces, and, the infiltration of money into the scientific method. I can only hope that's what the Thunderbolts guys start leading to, is trying to eliminate a lot of that, because they've done, I think, a great job, and to the best of their ability with the resources they were provided, of demonstrating some different concepts, despite the mainstream and the forces at work against them, so to speak. But I think that's it. I think that's where this will go. Ultimately, there will be movement further towards a higher level of understanding of this theoretical concept called space and the heavens and all of these things that are above us in the sky that we have accepted for such a long period of time on certain premises. I think it'll be, truly begun to be understood. And then, once understood fully, mapped out properly. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, the EU, their cosmology is solid. They have an answer for all the different types of stars, and they talk about the filaments that are out there. Their cosmology is solid, as opposed to mainstream cosmology, which is broken, where they have to readjust their models every time they find something new. When they look at the sun and they see an atomic bomb at the interior core, the only thing that's stopping it from exploding is gravity. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, their cosmology is rock solid, and they really can't do any more science with it until we get out there and look at it up close, what we're looking at through telescopes, and actually measure distances between us and objects.
Yeah, and let's talk about that actually, because so some years ago now, I did a paper about how Haumea's double ring system broke the gravity. Now we have this new Korak. I don't know how to pronounce the dwarf planet's name. Now has a proven ring system out well over twice the distance of the Roche limit, and it looks to me like the accretion gravity stuff is dead. And I think that Wal, if he were alive, would love to see that extra example. That, by my count, if you were to sit a panel of these scientists down to make predictions in the realm of things that Wal is qualified to talk about, he's going to win most of those predictions. And this is another example of something he would have said, "Oh yeah, it's no problem for this little dwarf planet to have a ring system well outside of the gravity accretion zone, because electricity is so much stronger than gravity. No problem at all." And I always wondered what he thought of that Haumea paper. I kind of expected after putting out that Haumea paper that I would hear from the Thunderbolts Project of all the things, because of how much it played into the area that he predicts in, comets and dwarf planets, and is electricity governing them or gravity? And it's just fascinating that news started coming out just there at the end. And I think that his predictions are going to continue to score shots and ring the bells well after his passing. I think we're going to hear. I think they will be able. Now, can the Thunderbolts get out of only living in the past and the successes there? But I don't know that. I don't know the community well enough inside. But
Wait till we put a person on a comet. Wait till we put a person on a comet.
It's going to definitely open things up.
And then they're going to change their tune.
Yes.
Well, Buddy,
they're not going to find any bloody ice.
Yeah.
Oh,
sorry,
great,
yeah. Buddy just joined. He honestly, I think out of all of us here, has had the most interaction with wall, and he didn't get a chance. But at the beginning, we all everybody quickly and succinctly kind of summarized how they, what Walt meant. You want to take a minute to do that for yourself?
Well, that was kind of out of the blue. I mean, well, I met Wal for the first time. Well, the only time. It was like a 3-day event. Their event, Thunderbolts conference, Electric Universe conference in 2017 out in Phoenix. And he just took a liking to me right away. And he's a gentleman and a scholar.
Mhm.
He didn't know me from anybody. And I mean, I guess I was somewhat influential to some degree, and I didn't know any degree of what people thought about me until I went there for the conference. And I gave him a gift, and he actually took a picture with the gift. I asked him if I could take his picture with it, and he said yeah. And then he told me that he turns down most people when they ask for a picture with the gift, because he's not trying to promote anything. He's not trying to have someone put something in his hands and take a picture of it and try to promote it. But it was a thunderbolt that I electrocuted into the wood, my fractal branding that I was doing at the time. It was a thunderbolt pendant, and I went around and I gave everybody those pendants. But I remember he had a soft heart, soft hands, and he was a hugger. I'm a hugger, and we exchanged a few hugs that weekend. And I do remember it happened to be the 2017 solar eclipse, and I was one of the last people inside. Everybody was running outside because the solar eclipse started, and everybody was playing outside. Most of the people were playing outside. And I go up to Wal and I'm like, hey, the solar eclipse is going on. Let's go check it out. And he's like, it's just a solar eclipse. I'm like, what? Like, isn't that like the thing that part of the things that we love about astronomy, and it's an event, And he's just like, I couldn't understand why he didn't want to go outside. Completely mobile, no problem moving around. Apparently I hear that he was completely mobile and had no problem moving around right up until he refolded. So that's just one of the memories that stuck out a lot to me, is that he just didn't want to go see the solar eclipse for some reason, and I was like, what the heck?
He'd probably seen enough of them over his lifetime to that the fantasy wore off for him.
Right. It was just strange to me, and
You say that, Rick, but I'm telling you, there were some really weird things that happened during and just after, like this, surrounding that eclipse. It was really very intriguing. And if the sun is an electrical source, and we're connected to it electrically, and we're having this interaction, it probably does have more of an effect than just the blocking of a shadow. But at any rate, I understand that he's, he probably has seen him before, and so he probably wasn't worried about it. This is a funny story that Buddy Cherry, though. You wouldn't expect it out of him.
No, that's the last thing I would expect out of him, and I was just pretty much my jaw dropped, and I'm just like, I just kind of like, I swear I just stood there and like stared at him for a couple seconds and then just turned around and walked out. I'm like, well, I'm going to play.
Well, the other thing that we talked about is where I asked the guys, where do they think the Thunderbolts group is going to go? Of course, this is a memorial episode and all of that. It's not a, it's just going public. But I, just wanted to get your thoughts as to, do you think that the Thunderbolts project that they'll be able to kind of pull through? Or do you think they're going to play a lot of, memories? And kind of get a bit in the background. We're having a lot of background noise. I'm not sure some of these pots and pans are kind of banging around.
I'm sorry, guys. I accidentally hit the unmute button. That's my fault.
Okay. Yeah, just so buddy, if you see them being able to move forward, or do you think that Thunderbolts is going to become a lot of reruns? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
I think it's had a lot of potential for a long time, and it's going to continue with potential. And it really depends on who teams up with them to make it continue.
You said potential.
We are the youth of the nation.
The voltage.
Voltage potential. Electric universe.
Yeah, it is potential, and we are the youth of the nation, and who cares about this stuff? I mean, who cares about this stuff? More like who cares about this stuff? Like, who actually cares? It seems like there's a rather large audience that cares, and I know a lot of them are older people, are elders, and it's up to us to take the torch, if indeed the torch is going to be passed on. But I think that's kind of in the process of what's going on right now, is they're passing on the torch. Don Scott's going to be the next script proofreader, and he doesn't even like proofreading the scripts. And his best friend just passed away, on his birthday.
Wow.
Yeah. So like, there's a lot of angst and a lot of tension.
In a way, though, it's nice for Wal that he gets to rest. He'll get to recharge in the counter space. He'll get some free ether. I think he's going to be back. I don't think that he was tired of this battle personally. And I don't know if it'll be how many decades it'll be. When he comes back, he's going to bring the fire. I think. That's just me personally. I don't see him saying in heaven. I really don't. But I'm happy for him to be able to rest, because he worked so hard. A lot of those guys have worked really, really hard. I mean,
Yep.
Steinbacher was like driving everywhere, just like pulling over every rock. It was like, oh my God,
we got David. We got David. Sorry to interrupt.
No,
go ahead.
No, you're fine.
We got David that's down.
Yeah.
And his children run the show. David Talbott's children. They're the ones that make the videos, put the videos together. Quite frankly, I'm not sure who's going to be doing the editing and the proofreading of the papers. I was talking with Doug, and I don't think I'm saying anything too private here, but it just breaks my heart to say this, but also makes me really. There's good and bad news. The bad news is Wal Thornhill's last paper that he last transcript for Thunderbolts video that he went through was Robert Burke. and it was a mess. It was a complete and utter mess. He worked back and forth with Robert Burke, and then they just canceled it. They said, come back with a different idea, please. They were nice about it. They said, hey, we're not done with you. We're not necessarily folding the towel here. And I guess that's when I don't want to give away too much information because I don't know if I know something that I don't want to say, but there were some signs going on during that was showing that that Wal wasn't doing so well. So it was during Robert's transcript that some of this came to light, that Wal wasn't doing that well. And Doug said he really wishes that was a bad decision on Doug to move with Robert Burke first. And he said he wishes it would have been you. You know,
Who said that? Doug said?
Doug said he wishes it would have been you. That then he would have got the episode out, and instead of just not had his last episode, you know.
Yeah.
And then whoever's episode was before him working with Robert Burke, I don't know whose it was. It might have been Claridge. Who knows who it was? But if it was Claridge or one of the normal guys, he would have maybe just scanned through the paper and gave it an okay, or not even scanned through it. So I'm not sure whose transcript was the very last successful show that went on Thunderbolts. But yeah, all of us wish it was you, Ramon.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I personally, like I said at the beginning of the show, I know he followed me on ResearchGate, so he would have been, I know, a fan of the early episodes that I plan to do with them. You know, I feel fine as I think that I can help his legacy along, even if I stick to just Electric Universe topics, which is it's obvious that that's really where they will get. They can't do what we can do and do all the extended cosmology ideas and go wherever we want. They have a very specific mission, and it's not good to try and alter that. Some of the ancients said 2 years, some of the ancients said 3 years. But more or less, you know, if you really honor somebody, you don't change their legacy right away. You know,
Right.
so they need to stick to that Electric Universe legacy for a little bit of time,
Yeah.
and that's okay because there's plenty of that work that I've got to release. It's no problem. My big concern is if they're not now, but if 6 months, if there's any kind of, I hope they can avoid any kind of internal squabbling. Hopefully they get it together or have it together enough to where, you know, I guess it would be, was it Susan Sherrod, I think is her name. I think that she will probably have to be the glue that keeps all this stuff together, and also Stuart Talbott.
Stuart,
to make sure they can't put all this on Don Scott. They're going to have to
he doesn't even
reconfigure.
He doesn't even like proofreading the transcripts. He's got
he was a professor already. You know, he's a retired professor. So he shouldn't have to.
What really sucks is that Wal was almost at the end of writing his magnum opus, his tome. I don't know if it was completed, or what. But I don't know if that's going to get released or what. But I can't wait to support and buy copies of that if it does get released. And I do know the last couple of months has been weird, and I thought that they were trying to push me off. But it was just, you know, there was just stuff happening behind the scenes that, you know, we weren't really aware of. Because I know he pushed Robert Burke off, and I thought Doug pushed Robert Burke off, you know, And then I thought they were kind of trying to do the same thing with me, but that's not the case at all. It was just there was stuff going on in the background. So it has been a weird couple of months because I've been working on this transcript, and then I did a couple of transcripts, trashed a couple, set a couple aside, and then I worked towards this one because they were asking me to just give them a few ideas, spitball a few ideas real quick and see which one they liked. Then they never really got back with me about which one they liked. So I'm like, okay, I'll just trash all those ideas, set them aside, and then start a new transcript. And that's the one I'm on right now, which connects the dots massively. It's and my episode was supposed to come out next Saturday, which would be the first episode since Wal's passing, but they pushed my episode out to 2 weeks from now because I think they're going to do a dedicated episode to Wal, which should be, the way it goes for sure.
Oh yeah, they need to do a remembrance episode for sure.
Yeah.
He was too important to the group to not pay attention to his passing. He's
the foundation, I mean, he's, I think, the COO, whatever that is, the coup.
Corporate executive officer.
Yeah, and he started
chief operating officer.
He started it, I don't know exactly who started it with him. I think Don Scott might have came in a little bit later, but I'm not exactly sure. Rick might know more than me about all that.
Not really.
Yeah. So I know that he was instrumental in starting it, and it might have been him working with Michael Claridge. Not really sure.
But starting what?
Started the Thunderbolts Project.
Well, that was him and Dave.
Okay, yeah. So I was right. Yeah, it is him and Dave.
That was him and Dave that got together, and he was interested in history, and Dave was putting together the historical side of the electric universe. Wal was looking at the cosmological side.
Oh yeah, it was Dave. I totally forgot about Dave Talbott in my head. It was
McFly.
Well, well, my whole like my hero, quote unquote hero, is Don Scott. That's the only reason why I know anything about this. I was watching a Christian theologian. I can't even remember the guy's name that I found out about the electric universe, but it was through watching sermons. I was watching sermons, and then I heard this sermon, and then this guy talked about Don Scott, and then I looked up Don Scott and the Birkeland currents, and I'm like, oh my God, that's what I'm drawing. And that's what drew me to the whole thing. I'm like, by far, I was studying it at that time for like 15 years of the Doherty set. And then I'm like, there's so many different sciences that it helps explain, but it doesn't fully explain any of those theories because they're incomplete theories. Once I saw Don Scott's video of the Birkeland current, I'm like, that's the Bessel function. That's what I'm drawing. That's what this is.
Well, see, Don Scott might have been there. I'm not 100% sure, but he might have been there right from the beginning.
He was. I do believe that he was one of the half dozen to 10 men that got together for ironing all this stuff out. It would have been interesting to see how he reacted to the Venus-Mars thing at the time. I mean, there was quite some difference and among the guys as to what they were going to agree upon, and they obviously Talbott and Wal came out of that and took the lead and actually built it all out.
And he was probably reading.
There was no YouTube at the
papers for his Chronos papers, his little pamphlets, his little books that he put out.
A lot of it was,
and all of them got together and started the universe, the electric universe. So
yeah, a lot of it was based off of Velikovski. So it's Velikovskianism.
They were almost all Velikovskians.
Oh yeah,
but Anthony Pratt was there as well.
Yeah,
and he was not. He was a scientific experimenter, and he was a part of that early formation crew. There were some fallouts. There were people also who disagreed very heavily, and yet they maintained working together. Eduardo Cardona did not agree with a couple of the guys, and yet they let him continue to present.
Right.
Which tells me that there was, enough professionalism and forgiveness
Yeah.
on their part. I don't know what happened. I know that Peratt got burned.
Well, what pulled Peratt in
him.
was he was obviously a hunter, and he was looking at the glyphs that are in the area. Every time he went out on hunts, he'd see all these glyphs, and he saw resemblance to the things that he saw in the laboratory that are highly classified, that not everybody can see. But he dealt with this stuff every day.
Correct.
And as above, so below, that theme probably was sticking in his mind like it does most of us, because it's truth. It's how the universe works. It's scalable. And Wallace has said that many times, that the universe is scalable. What happens out there on a large scale that takes forever to complete a cycle happens on a small scale down in the atomic realm or the biofield realm really quickly.
To speak in terms of Buckminster, it's omni-expansive, omni-contractive, and that's why it's as above, so below, because we're seeing the same patterns on a large scale as we're seeing on a small scale, and that's one of the main tenets of alchemy. Alchemy, one of the main tenets of it is as above, so below.
We're going to get into that this morning. I just began sharing my screen. We can continue talking, but you guys are going to see me working on this feng shui paper, and we're going to talk about as above, so below. Jonathan, you've gotten rather quiet in the discussion about.
He's doing dishes.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
We heard.
No, I'm getting the dogs' food ready, man. It's past their time to eat.
I understand. Okay,
I gotta feed them before they bite my arm off.
Well, I didn't know if that meant you had something you didn't, you were holding back, or that's
well.
fine. Okay,
I mean, I got my own contentions when it comes to the Velikovski theory, and it has nothing to do with his work. It has nothing to do. I know that Wal was one of the last to sit with him as an actual individual, in terms of the Thunderbolts group. So I've got my own contentions in that regard. I think there's a ultimate. I love all of the theories. I love all of the concepts. I love everything that they're doing. I'm not going to sit here and try to talk negatively about any of it. I just, man, as much as it pains me to say, I still feel very deep inside of my personal intuition that there's a underlying agenda to present certain levels of truth, but yet not give up the farm, so to speak. And I think that was a lot of what Velikovski's ultimate, motivation was, to maintain our understanding of the universe in terms of, what we're seeing in the heavens, or what we've been told we're seeing in the heavens, versus the actual, the plasma electric sun relationship. It's a very, very useful mechanism to maintain the concepts of space while at the same time explaining the natural phenomenon we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, and also account for the technological advancements that are occurring here in our world.
But you realize that can happen without a Sabbatian conspiracy. It can also just literally be a matter of what they feel comfortable with, and sticking their necks out. Because in their time, it really was much more their necks. So with the internet now, I mean, for God's sakes, we got men undressing in women's locker rooms and claiming that they're women. So nobody gives a shit anymore. Everybody's willing to be sensational and to bring out whatever they want to say. But in their time, I mean, Peratt really did seriously get burned by being associated with these guys. And that's part of his anger. Part of it was that they didn't really get his permission.
Well, he didn't get. He gave the boys some information that was classified,
Correct.
and the boys couldn't hold their tongues because
It was too
it's
exciting.
basically it
Yeah,
was
super.
basically confirmation.
They printed it on T-shirts. From what I hear, is I don't know what the exact beef was, but I thought this is what I heard through the grapevine is that they took his Paratian Thunderbolts that he made in the lab and printed it on T-shirts. They gave him
That's
credit.
genius.
They gave him.
You avoid all copyright. Sorry to interrupt, Matt. That you avoid all copyrights by printing it on a T-shirt. You don't have to.
It depends on if you sell it or not. If you sell it, you don't.
I don't know. From my understanding, you can print things on print on a T-shirt
No,
are
you can get
considered
still
different
get
than it
sued.
is in terms of the copyright law.
Trust me, you could still get sued if you're trying to sell it. You can still get sued.
That's a fact. If someone put the Doherty set on a T-shirt and started selling it, that's my copywritten and intellectual property. So you can't just do that.
Luckily, Buddy becomes fans of them being his fans, and so the guys who are posting his stuff, Buddy's like, oh, let's be friends.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean
does
to throw
happen.
the train of thought off there. I didn't mean to throw it off, but I think there's a reason why when you print something on a T-shirt, it's different than putting it on a publication.
He didn't sue them, but he did shun them forever after that. So
he couldn't sue them because it wasn't actually his
data
it's not
his
that
stuff.
He was showing.
Correct.
It was classified information that the government owned.
It harmed his career, which is
they ruined his career. Yeah, because
not ruined it. He moved from Los Alamos to NASA JPL, so he wasn't totally broken, but it
gave
obviously didn't do him. It didn't do him any favors.
Just to clarify, they did give him credit on the T-shirt.
Oh yeah.
And it was 2003, and that's when the Doherty set came to me. That geometry of the Doherty set vision.
Well, that's why they call him Parat instabilities, because he was the one that brought it to their attention.
Yeah. So it is his discovery or classified. I don't know. I don't know when the date of something becomes unclassified, but if you look up the Mueller fractal and
I think it's 70 years.
Hartmut Mueller was working with the Russian government and his material was classified for like 20 plus years. Then once it was unclassified, he came out and started talking about it. And I interviewed Hartmut Mueller. He was in our, he was the first person that I put out in the World Expo, the Electromagnetic World Expo that we had last year. And then speaking on that again, which I mean, Hartmut Mueller, it's amazing, his content. It's called interscaling. But anyway, that was classified at one time. But back to the idea of these conferences, since David went through what he went through, they haven't been having conferences. Then they saw me and us start posting on Facebook, Electric Universe Conference, and they're like, wait a minute, like, shouldn't we be throwing this? Who are these guys? And then they're like, oh, it's Buddy. So on April Fool's Day last year, April 1st, I got a call from the Thunderbolts Project asking me to change the name of my event. And I was,
which you were gracious enough to do. You were kind, and I might have been like, but you were kind.
So I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes. I'm just trying to continue what you guys started. Like, if you want me to name it something else, they're like, call it a bazaar, call it a festival, call it something else, not conference, not Electric Universe Conference. And
would have been, I'll be honest, I personally would have been offended, and I would have been like, call it whatever I want. I'll call it your mom if I feel like,
But that's
but
how
you're
I got-
really you're a kind person, and you worked with them.
Yeah, and that's how I got into the Thunderbolts. He said they said well, yeah, we want you to do an episode, but it was April Fool's Day, so I thought that it was a joke, you know. And then a couple of months went by, or a month or so, and then I get another call, and they're like, actually, we really do want you to do an episode. And then my first episode was the most viewed episode in 3 years on the Thunderbolts Project. For 3 years, they didn't have a video that had more views, and I partially told them it's because I have a lot of viewers and a lot of people that are digesting the content, and plus I have 36,000 people on my electric geometry Facebook page. So fast forward to our conference, and the Thunderbolts sent one of their own to come and see what we had going on and to look for new talent, because the same people keep doing videos with them. Same people, you'll keep seeing the same people. That's what helped propel my video to be viewed so much, because they named it electric geometry, which is a dead ringer for the names of what I've been calling my stuff. And I'm new. So I think they recognized, hey, if we put in new people, we'll get more views and we'll start to pull in a new, younger generation. And so Doug came to our event that we threw, and they were looking for talent. He was scouting for talent. That's exactly what he did. And he talked to each individual, you know, Jason Bobier, Robert Burke, trying to fish for new talent. That's the only way that they can continue to propel this Goliath that they've started. Is to start to bring in the younger generation, because like I said, they just keep putting on the same 5, 6, maybe 20, 15 different people over and over and over, and they need people that will actually work with them.
Yeah, but if you're a true follower of the electric universe, those 15 people or 10 people never get stale. I mean, ever.
They're great, but they recognize, they look around, you know, they look around the room and they're like,
well, they want to grow.
Yeah, how can we grow? We have to change in order to grow. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over. So
Yep, agreed.
So although they referred to me as low-hanging fruit, and Wal didn't even want to do the geometry. He didn't even want to incorporate it. He's like, that's too much. You know how there's a staunch hatred for mathematics and mathematicians in the electric universe cosmology. There's a
geometry is different.
It is. That's what it's all composed of, is geometry. It's not the abracadabra mathematics fudging numbers. It's the most actual of all mathematics. It's the only way you can prove something is through geometry. You can't prove anything in the universe. You can only prove things, and proofing only comes through geometry. So
well,
that's what I've heard.
Yeah, but I mean, have you? Again, I'm not trying to be confrontational, but have you actually taken a mathematics course where you create a proof?
I'm not good at any of that stuff. This is all working for the past.
I have. In my linear algebra, in my linear algebra class, and not buddy you, but dude, it's really hard. It's really hard to do. It takes. I mean, the numbers are easy. It's the logics of it that are extremely difficult. I used to routinely get slayed by the TA. It's a very difficult line of work, doing mathematical proofs, and they do not generally just being totally honest with you. They do not generally involve geometry itself. But what I think is interesting about your hypothesis is that out of the power of numbers, there are so many domains that we haven't explored because of the domination of numerical methods, that there's something obvious about looking at shape. Whether it's we look at the uniqueness of snowflakes, or the self-similarity of organisms,
Or the
or
Pratian.
Well, geometry.
the fractal.
Geometry
Let me
is-
finish. Let me
Sorry,
finish.
go ahead.
Or the fractal nature of growth, or of shells and sunflowers. When you look at it, your brain recognizes something that is there, and you don't end up needing, just for that moment of experience, you don't end up needing an engineered tool like linear algebra or calculus in order to understand that something incredibly intrinsically, mimsically important is happening in that geometry.
Right.
And that I think is what you're going with, rather than the official concept of proofing in the field of mathematics.
I'll say it again. Geometry is different.
It breaks down.
It's what we observe, putting those shapes into a mathematical equation.
Right.
Now
it breaks down to.
Now hang on. Let me finish my thought.
That's all I wanted to say. Sorry.
The way things are done in the cosmos, we observe stuff. We say, oh, that can't be right because it can't be held together. They make a mathematical model of something that they can't observe, and then they call it the truth. That's the difference between geometry and the other maths. Geometry, natural math, a more natural math.
Yeah, for me, I think what we've got the issue of time, the issue of space. How do you observe these things and then pinpoint it down to an algebraic linear proof? And just to use a great example, the Pascal. Even within the Pascal, I'll read the definition here. The Pascal is the unit of pressure for the SI, the International System of Units, and is used to quantify internal pressure and stress, right? And it's used basically equivalent to what? Hold on, how many newtons? Common units of Pascal is the heptopascal. Sorry, but anyway, the Pascal is based on kilograms per meter and second squared or whatever. But then that rolls right into the Newton. So it's basically the same thing as a Newton, right? Where N is the Newton and M is the meter. But a Newton, within itself is the definition of what a Newton is defined as the force necessary to provide the mass of 1 kilogram with an acceleration of 1 meter per second. So even inside of the definition of a Pascal to a Newton, that they're all interrelated back down to our concept of what time is, our labeling of what a second actually is. And that's ultimately, I think, back to the coastline paradox issue above and below.
Yeah.
That's the issue we're faced with.
It's the metric tensor, the smallest possible unit of measurement. It's the Planck's length. This is a simple way to kind of look at it. Throughout eons, there's been different scientists who have come out and said God is a mathematician. The mathematics of God, the mathematics of nature, is fractals. Fractions of fractions of fractions that repeat themselves self-similarly and recursively over and over. Now, you look out into nature, and what do we see? We see symbols. An animal is a symbol. A bird is a symbol. A tree is a symbol. There's a geometry to it. The geometry breaks down of the breakdown of roughness and geometry of clouds, of coastlines. That's how fractals came to be, is understanding roughness. Benoit Mandelbrot was the one who really cavaliered this movement and pushed it forward. There was other mathematicians before him, Pascal.
Right.
a bunch of different people, and they came up with their own little fractal, and their own tiny little fractal meant so much. I'm trying to think of another one. I can't. There's a bunch of them, but one.
But it ultimately results down to ratios, right? So we have the golden ratio. It's a ratio type issue, I think, more than almost anything. But
so
it does kind of break down to the ratio at the time of observance.
So if
more than it does the actual numbers.
If we take what these physicists and astronomers and mathematicians have said before, that God is a mathematician, and we move forward with that notion, and we add to it our architecture, it's all geometry. All architecture is geometry. It's up to the geometer to draw the building and draft it out. All of these beautiful, the Pyramid of Giza, everything is geometry. So you could take it one step further and say God is a geometer. And what do the Freemasons refer to God as? The great geometer. That's what God is to the Freemasons. That's partially why the G is the G in Freemasonry. It's the seventh letter. It's G. It's God. It's geometry. God is the language of nature is symbols, and those symbols come about by sound. Sound. I'd like to believe that God spoke the universe into existence, and this is all reverberations of the sounds. You got the Vajra. The Vajra.
I agree with that.
The Vajra is a Paratian thunderbolt. You have the trident. You have the god of the water, whatever his name was. You have the god of the sky, Zeus.
Poseidon.
And they have these tridents. Poseidon, they have these tridents. What are these tridents? It's a tuning fork. You hit it and it creates a vibration. This is all, it all comes down to, and I don't know if this is why Wal was afraid to have a geometer or to even start involving the geometry, since I'm not an accredited scholastic scholar. I didn't go to school for this.
Yeah, it's a lack of bona fides, but it's
Right.
also that you're young, and also he doesn't know where you're coming from. So there's like
Exactly.
several layers, and you just had to overcome that. Which
Yeah,
you found a way.
And
Exactly.
see where I run into some problems for myself and my intuition and understanding is if sound creates shapes, i.e. through like what we've seen through demonstrated cymatics.
Yeah.
Right. But yet sound cannot exist within a vacuum, or it doesn't exist within a vacuum. So NASA has a lot of explaining.
In a pure vacuum.
Right. So NASA has a lot of explaining to do in that regard. Right. But
Yeah.
Beyond that, maybe it's sound. And I actually wrote this on a comment on some guy's paper on academia. I said, beyond that, perhaps sound being recognized as a catalyst as opposed to a causality is a great place to start. And I think what I meant by that is that sound is what, inside of our closed system here, sound is what is driving everything.
Yeah.
The voice of God.
Yeah.
Well,
so
from my
it's driving everything, and all of the resulting matter and material world we see is a result of the waves created, or the for lack of better words, I don't know, just waves created through the ether from sound.
Well, that's what I'm about to say, that sound requires a medium to move through. What about the ether?
Yeah.
How do we know that sound does not exist out in space?
One could say that electromagnetism could be the quote unquote sound of the ether. And also you could say the other way around. You could say sound, just like water is a reflection of Tao, sound is a reflection. It's a reflection that we're able to comprehend, because
sound is a vibration.
When you get too much sound, when you get too much decibels up, because the decibel system is logarithmic, it destroys. I mean, and we can't handle that kind of power.
Well, so sound is a vibration.
That you're not hearing me.
Yeah.
Ironically.
I am.
Sound may be the limited version of the force in which we are supposed to be keying in because we are limited.
I
Its
think
rate is slow. It's 740 miles an hour, roughly. And that's a lot more accessible to humans than
the speed.
186,000 miles per
Right.
second.
Right. So let me clarify a couple of things here, because as far as I know, sound does exist in a vacuum, and Hans Alfvén, the guy who started magnetohydrodynamics, proved this with something that's named after him called Alfvén waves. Alfvén waves. This is sound in space. It's already been proven. Sound does exist in space, and the planet
space is not a vacuum. Would be a really good point to
it's
make.
moving through a medium. The medium is ether. It's the sonoriferous ether.
Well, that and there's literally particles and magnetic fields everywhere. Alfvén waves exist in a magnetic medium. That's the magnetic field that is doing the rippling. But there is something called acoustic shockwave cosmology, and it involves space. Of course, it also involves the Big Bang. So I'm not sure that it's something I can get behind. But so sound doesn't move through a pure vacuum. But if you put enough of the particles inside to where they can communicate with each other, yeah, you can get shock, especially with enough energy. You can get shock waves to move through that, even if they're very interspersed particles. Very interspersed. I mean, we're talking miles away from each other, and that tells you something. Of course, they're interacting because particles have fields. They have charge electric fields. So this sound that you're seeing, this rippling through space, is still going through the electric medium, and that's where Wal would have been coming from.
Well, if one particle,
But again, I think it's a
is-
causality. It's a causality, not a catalyst.
if one particle is tied to another particle, and one particle starts vibrating because of an outside force, the other particle is going to vibrate. Strange axiom at a distance.
And sound happens to be, from what I've heard, the master vibration out of all the vibrations, because it's the only vibration that moves longitudinal, that has longitudinal waves. It has both logarithmic and longitudinal waves, so it moves through all mediums, whereas a lot of the other frequencies, they stop, or they become something else when they hit other mediums.
Well, it's okay to have difference, but I think you're mistaking the sun for the moon, and the obviousness is of talking about power levels. There's no comparison with sound versus the force itself and the field. And like I say,
Exactly.
there's a very likelihood that sound is merely the vibratory equivalent of water to Tao. It's something that we can comprehend at our scale, at our particular sets.
And size.
But the universal sound is going to be related to the Planck length itself. It's going to be related to the c, the rate of light in vacuum. It's going to be related to phi. It's going to be related to pi or tau, depending on which one you prefer.
The
It's
unifying force.
It's going to be related to, yes, this unified ether field,
I
which
don't
is the
think
plasma electromagnetic force.
I don't think there's an absolute speed of light. The speed of light changes
No,
as it
probably
moves
not.
through different mediums. Same with the speed of sound as it moves through different mediums. And sound is extremely healing. Think about the mantras of the monks and the Om, Om, and when you hug someone and you're like, that's the Om, that's
And
the Om.
Why does sound vibrations move faster through water, a more dense material than air?
Right. There's a lot of tricky things with it, but to touch back on what Jonathan was talking about in cymatics, the only thing happening in cymatics is the Bessel function. Well, not the only thing. That's what we see on the surface. There's subsurface vortices. So sound is vortex based. This is all vortex math, which is why vortex math is such a big thing and should be bigger. But the pre-Socratic philosophers, they even knew that the universe is vortex based, because they were just staring at water. They were just stirring water inside of cauldrons and coming to these conclusions that, look, this is moving around this is moving around this, and this spirals around this. Like us looking at a lava lamp, you can see that this is how the universe works. So there were so many, up until just recently, the vortex theory was the main theory in electromagnetism in the universe. And then it was squashed by the Michelson-Morley theory. The vortex theory went out threw the baby out with the bathwater there. And I didn't know all this and realize this until just recently, reading through some of these books that I got. But it's still a vortex-based universe. When you look at the cymatics, every single pattern, all 100 million bazillion different patterns that exist, from mixing frequencies and frequencies on the surface of water, those are all Bessel functions. That's all sound. That's all symbolism. We can see it. It's absolute. It's not. It's absolute. And then there's sub-vortices to it. There's something neat about knowing that the universe is composed of sound and possibly spoken into existence.
Morning, Sean.
It's a fundamental of a lot of religions.
Yeah.
And God, at the very beginning, what was on the surface of the water? The living spirit of God was on the surface of the water. That's not in the Bible by accident. They're talking about cymatics, bro.
Yeah.
That's the living spirit.
Absolutely.
That's the living spirit of God. Like it talked about in the dumbest and the most dumbed down possible way, the beginning of the universe, the beginning of life on Earth as we know it. There was nothing.
I got to correct you on. I got to correct you on that, buddy. The Bible, the beginning is the beginning when Saturn flared, and came into this solar system. That's the beginning in the Bible and all other creation myths. It's not the true beginning of the earth, because no life was around when it was first brought into existence. So go ahead.
That's the two suns, right? The dividing of the light.
Yeah.
Well, I have a very different way of approaching that, but it's kind of neither here nor there for the moment.
Man, I'm jumping in real quick, guys. I'm kind of piggyback real quick. Hello, good morning. Off of what Rick just said. In the Zohar, I have a copy of the Zohar here, and I read it to people all the time. The section of the first light. The first light that God created in Genesis 1:3 was the primal eye. And it goes on to keep talking about the eye. It was revealed to Moses. And when he went up on the mountain, I'm sorry, I'm breathing a little hard. He had to wear a veil over his face. It was also revealed to Adam first. Then it was revealed to David. But God took the light away because the sinners, it says, were glorying in its splendor. And he took the light away and hid it as a secret forever. So we know what the eye is. Do we not know what the primal eye is? From the
polar configuration.
It's the eye. It's the eye. And it's like, holy crap, like, damn. So that section of the Zohar, if you couple it with Ev Cochran's paper about the eye of Horus, excellent. It just breaks it all down, the destructive eye, any aspect of the eye. It had many forms, but
the all-seeing eye.
It is the eye.
The eye of God.
The eye. Yeah, it's the eye. Like, well, damn.
Odin's eye.
The eye. Yeah, there you go. It's the eye in the sky, man. Like, well, okay. All right. That's according to the Zohar, which is Basic teachings from the Kabbalah.
The angels with eyes all over their bodies. You know, the 4 living creatures around the throne. Yeah, it's according to the Doherty set, you can see the eyes on every scale. All it is scales of eyes. Then you look out in the cosmos in different stellar formations, and you see eyeballs. Is the whole configuration of certain nebulas meant to just observe certain other places in the universe? Are they large scale eyeballs? You know, like, what if we came up with the technology to blow up the Earth and the solar system to create an eye to observe the greater God, to observe the greater universe? You know, like, what if it all comes down to creating eyes, and it's a lenticular universe, like Russell said. It's a
You may find this kind of funny in a weird way. You know, the text I bring up often from China, the modern one that has had such an influence on them and on Obama, the 3-body problem. In I think it's the very first book in the 3-body problem. The aliens are busy trying to unfold particles into 2-dimensional and 1-dimensional space. The 1-dimensional gets everywhere, and they can't get rid of it. It's like these thin wires that are all over. It's just a single electron. It's been turned into 1-dimensional space. It's very hilarious. But then when they do the 2-dimensional, it makes these like I guess triangles. I can't remember exactly what shape. And what they see is a big giant eyeball. It starts attacking them because they opened up a portal to another dimension through turning a 3-dimensional particle into a 2-dimensional. The first thing that they see is this big giant eye, and it starts attacking them, and they freak out. So it's buried in our subconscious, whether that's from the cataclysms and, you know, the storms on Neptune and Jupiter, or if that's a greater thing like Buddy's talking about, is not exactly clear. But it's funny.
And Buddy, big time shout out to you. My son came down yesterday for brunch, and he was like, "Yo, man, I saw this really dope video." And I'm like, "A Thunderbolts video." I said, "I don't know the guy's name, but it's called Donuts." And I said, "Oh, that's Buddy." He was like, "Dad, that video is dope." He was like, "Ask him, does he do shrooms and acid?" I mean, he looked at it. He said, "This is shit I see."
How much is the answer?
He said, "This is the shit I see whenever I'm fucking tripping." And I was like, "Hey, man, Buddy's is a cool dude, man. He knows his shit. Isn't that shit dope?" You know, like, he was like, "Yeah, Dad, that is mind blowing." He's like, "Can't stop watching it." Just
Sean,
wanted to throw that in there.
I don't care that you share it. Just to make you aware, this is the Wal Thornhill Memorial Podcast.
I'm so sorry. Okay.
No problem. You do it. You do you. Just making sure you're aware of it.
Okay, cool. And yeah, guys, I'm sorry I'm coming on late, but yeah, I got a phone call about Wal Thornhill and was like,
yeah, I wanted to hear your reactions.
Believe it or not, because I was doing like a sort of a wellness check. Michael Armstrong talks to Doug Cerrone quite often, and I was like, "Michael, ask Doug if he's heard from Wal, because I haven't in 2 months. Okay, from January to now, I haven't heard from him." I said, he won't answer any emails. I said, "That's really strange. Just find out, you know." And he said, "Okay." And then he called me at work at 3:00 Eastern time on Friday and told me what happened. And I was like, "Son of a bitch," you know. Just, I sent him several emails. We had outlined a interview, and I feel like I blew it because I should have did the interview like November, December, but my schedule was kind of icky, and I only had 1 day off a week. So I said, "We'll pick this back up in January." And that was it, you know. And I was like, wow, you know, wow. He did say he was having some family issues. He didn't say he was having health issues. And I'm like, okay. So, you know, Michael Armstrong thought maybe, you know, one of his kids was having some issues or something, you know. We didn't know what to think. He must have been having health issues, obviously. So it came to us as like, wow, you know, just kind of took the wind out of our sails, because it's like,
sure,
geez, he's the group. Him and Dave Talbott are the group, you know, so to speak.
How did it make you feel? And
well,
what are your general thoughts about? It's a
how
good lesson, though. People call people because you never know.
how it made me feel. Well, what I was trying to get at with Wall, and this was my thing. This wasn't his thing. Guys like Professor Dave. Wall is not going to lock horns with people like that. He said that. But I had to look at it like it was one of my family members. If one of my family members is doing what Wall's doing, and you get some dweebo that makes a video, and now when you Google his name, this video is the first thing that pops up, the video has to come down. That was my thing. We have to, and I was going to tell him about it. We have to, when you flag a YouTube video, we have to try to get the video removed. For him, for the one he did for Sapphire, he also did one about Eric Lerner. Those videos have to come down because now, if you do Google his name and he's deceased, what do you see? BS comes up. Professor Dave's video, you will see his holoscience page, but you'll see other articles that are negative articles. That is just not cool at all.
That's what the system has planned for all of us. Yeah.
I don't know that the,
like the family,
I don't know if it's fair to violate. I don't know if it's fair to kind of go against the First Amendment concept. I just think that these individual algorithms that are being pushed forward need to be properly free. I think that's the main key. And whenever you Google an individual's name and negativity is the first thing that you get, that means that algorithm's pushing it forward.
Correct. I did a search. I'll prove your point. I did a search the other day for a paper, and it was a very specific video. Should have been only one top result. Crowder exposes trans conference, something like that. And I took screenshots of the results at work the other day because the top 10 results were all videos hating Crowder and also asserting that not only was he transphobic, but it loved to also dress up as a woman. And then, so I just go to DuckDuckGo and I'm able to find the video lickety split and find exactly the video, which is, here's what happened. He pretended to be a obese trans female who hated Trump. And they didn't bother vetting this person, seeing if it was a real person. They were like, come on in. Not only got to give a whole speech, then gave them papers. These are fake papers, of course. Got published, all that stuff. Then he outed the whole thing. This is a 2-month, sting that he did, and proved that these are not scientists. These are hacktivists who are pretending to be scientists in order to move a social political agenda. And that's what he exposed. And so the system's like, well, we can't have that. So instead, it promoted all these things that went after him personally, rather than. But if it was a true algorithm, the first thing that it should have come up with is the video where he exposed this conference. And it used to work that way. And I hope the kids that are listening, provided that Rumble stays free and over the next 10 to 20 year period, if they hear this episode, they understand that this is done on purpose, and it didn't used to be this way. The algorithms used to be designed to find you the best results. So, anyways,
they used to put the top views on the top, not the top views of the scientists on top.
Correct. And we see ChatGPT; they're totally modifying. Anyway, we're off topic from Wal Thornhill.
Yeah, what's the line with the First Amendment though? Because I mean, if you can
clear and present danger,
you can disagree with somebody's information. But if you use the words fraud, stupid, dumb, and you're insulting a person, well, see, if he was on the streets, that wouldn't happen. I talked to Mike Armstrong about that. Like, you have internet thugs nowadays, but when you're out face to face with a person, we've talked about this. People don't behave that way.
They don't because they could get stomped.
Right. Look at Michael Shermer went to the conference, and it was cool, man. Shermer was like, these people. Yeah, everything was cool. They weren't insulting each other. They may disagree, but it was handled like mature adults. This guy's like a child. So, I mean, I wouldn't want, my uncle, or if he was my father, to have something like that. Whereas, the man has done some great things in his life, obviously. So did Velikovski. But then, you see the anti stuff first. And I'm like, that's just, to me, that bothers me.
Well, it wouldn't exist. It really wouldn't exist, though, if if the algorithms were free, which is Jonathan's point. But to answer your
Mhm.
question, clear and
Yeah.
present danger is the legal limit.
Okay.
And so they can do that. It's legal. But people tend to shy away from that kind of negativity unless it's being forced on them. Like the mainstream media forces you to think that every neighbor you have is a secret serial killer. That information is not true, statistically speaking. Gun violence has gone down and rape has gone down and all these things have gone down, but they constantly want you to think, oh, every girl is going to get raped. What is it? 1 in 3 or 1 in 2? It's bullshit. Of course, it's been proven to be bullshit, but that's the way that they want you to live in fear because it gives them more control.
Right.
And that to me is a clear and present danger because it actually creates a society of paranoia and fear and results in people doing these mass shootings and things like that. To me, that is a
Not
clear and present
trusting
danger
each
violation.
other,
Right.
being suspicious of each other all the time, and then reporting on each other.
Yes. But anyways, I wanted
It
to
just
more
gets
specifically.
stitches.
I wanted to more specifically, Sean, your reaction.
Yeah.
First of all, how you felt about his work, and then what do you think will happen with the Thunderbolts legacy?
Well, yeah, that was my thing. You know, I talk to Michael Armstrong all the time, and you know, when this happened and we talked, there's really Ev, Michael Armstrong, Mel Atchison, um, the 3 eldest, you know, principal members. That's what you have left now. Michael hasn't published anything in a long time. I think the newest Don Scott too. I'm sorry. Their newest book was published through Stickman, maybe. So that's what we talk about it. He wants the next generation to keep the core, you know, if you will, and just keep pushing it forward. But while they're still here, now they're talking about, you know, him doing more videos, etc. I don't know about Dr. Scott, but I've talked about these things for years. It kind of makes me not worried, but sort of worried that, you know, we don't want the Electric Universe, the Thunderbolts Project, to just stop. Velikovski's work stopped for a little bit till these guys picked it back up. So it's up to younger generation to keep it moving forward. That's about the best way I could put it. I hope it doesn't slow it down to a standstill. I really hope it doesn't. You know, I really don't. It makes me feel some kind of way. Yeah. So right now I'm kind of feeling some kind of way about this. Like, was there a contingency plan? Probably not. You know, I don't really know what to say. I'm kind of at a loss of words. I don't want things to like fade though. I read something that Buddy wrote to Neil um, yesterday, and it was dead on. I know we all have problems and issues in life, but now's the time to shine. Basically, the younger generation of, we'll just call us EU enthusiasts. We have to keep the thing going. It's pretty much up to us. I mean, that's the best way to put it.
As the kids would say, the boomers are passing.
Yeah, the boomers are passing. That's
And
what it
Gen
really
X is really in control, whether it wants to be or not. That's a big question. I don't know
Right.
about Gen X's control,
yeah.
but Gen Y and millennials have a chance to move in and really do
And-
something. But
and
the key
problem
is to connect to Generation Z. That's the key.
The problem is Gen Y kind of jumped over Gen X because they feel like, oh, you know, we're just gonna, yeah, whoa. I'm like, wait a minute.
We got tired of waiting. We got tired of
We're
waiting.
here though, but we're here, and it's like it's not a big deal, but it's weird because our parents are the same age. I was born in 1969. My parents were like 20 years old whenever I was born. Then I have other cousins that were born in like 1980, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. Parents are still the same age. What it really comes down
Yeah,
to.
but Gen Z thinks you're a boomer, even though you're Gen X.
I know
That's
that.
hilarious.
That's weird. That's so
hilarious.
weird. I know. And it's like,
Yeah,
no, we're
I
not
know.
really
No.
boomers. I'm like
No, you're
4 or
Gen
5
X.
years away from that. We just have to just you know, especially for Gen X, man, we just got to keep doing what we're doing. You know, we're just like the older
Don't you think though it was awfully? I mean, we're a little off topic, but don't you think it was a little easy for your generation to just kind of let the boomers run the show? I mean, you can't blame Buddy's and my generation and Jonathan's for wanting to, because we have. If we don't help to connect, how your generation grew up without the internet.
Yeah.
So the thing is that we, to some degree, we understand these Gen Zers. To other degrees, I'm like, man, their memes make no sense. But it seems that we have a way to lubricate what the boomers and Gen X are saying in a way for the Gen Z to understand. Nobody gets the millennials, and that's just
I was a baby boomer at the tail end.
Rick's a boomer. He's a tail end boomer. That is right.
Yeah, but you really feel super Gen. No offense, sure. I mean, whereas Buddy, we joke that he's a hippie. You actually seem like an actual hippie.
Peace, man.
But
and we got to work together. I mean, that's the main
we
thing.
do.
Especially if people in this group, we're on the same page, more or less. We're on the same page, no matter if we're X's, Y's. I don't even know.
I only want to punch you guys in the face half the time. No, I'm kidding. But we really do. That's the one thing that's different about us versus a lot of the boomers. They did fight. They straight up. They were just like, oh, screw that guy. He has a slight difference in his plasma cosmology. Fuck him. I'm gonna go do whatever I want over here, I'm gonna sell books. They were big on selling books and having conferences to sell books at, and that is not something Gen Z connects to. They just don't.
They don't know they didn't know their ego. Most generations don't understand their ego, and that is a problem. And you want people that don't have an ego to be in your group. You don't want people with egos in your group because they will put a wrench in it every single time. Every single time.
A real shame about, that each generation's ignorant and has to be taught, because the actual this really does touch over the feng shui stuff now. The actual arrangement of resources and opportunities, and also how the changes have changed. Like, our country is obviously very different than it was at the end of World War II. It just is. And so the actual opportunities that were available to boomers is so much different than it was for our generation.
Correct.
I think that Gen X had the best overall time because they had the electronics and the cartoons and Star Trek and they had all the stuff, Star Wars, etc. But they didn't have the dangerously leveraged technology that we have, that these kids have now. Obviously, it had a huge effect on millennials. And then now the Gen Z, I don't know if we can't expect them to know up from down, because there's so much between the gaslighting and the deep fakes and the sound bites that are designed by corporations and echoed about, the dangerousness to our democracy. If I were them, I wouldn't even trust the mirror in front of me. And I don't blame them. Whereas your generation, I mean, you grew up at Walter Cronkite. The news was the news. It was actual facts. And now we don't know what the fuck to trust. So now there's apps that help you, and they go, well, you can believe this news because it's biased in this way. And I'm like, well, here's the central problem. That spectrum, I'm glad to have that app. But what it really illustrates is none of this can be objectively factual information. You just have to determine how much of a centrist you are. And outside of that, you're like, oh man, because if you are always leaning in this one pole, whether it's right or left, you're going to, there's a guilt there. You got to go, oh man, I'm definitely not listening to the other side. So then you go back to the centrism, but what's the problem with centrists? They never take a side. So now the whole thing is become very truthiness, which of course was a secret society psyop, I think, saying truthiness. It wasn't just George W. Bush was having a stupid moment. He's a Skull and Bones member, so he's introducing the concept of what AOC's later picked up on. Well, these people think facts are more important than how I feel about them. It's like, yeah, that's exactly what we think. But truthiness has entered our society, and this is worse than just your typical lossiness of Mandela effect of what's real and we remembered it wrong. Truthiness is this very, like, you guys go over there and practice your cosmology. You can be big bangers, and we'll go over here and we'll do our acoustic shock wave, or we'll go do our this, or the dark matter people are over here, and all of us get to be right at the same time. And that is not, from my opinion, how the universe actually operates. There is an objective truth, and that is the whole purpose of science, is to eliminate bad hypotheses about that objective truth. And we are now operating with multiple timeline of truthy data. And a show like Mythbusters, I've been watching with the kids. First of all, it's not politically correct. Like the second episode is about a big-butted woman, being stuck on an airplane, which turned out to be a myth, a legend, an urban legend. But I just don't think the show's concept would even be approved, because the kids are being taught that they should want to live in the myth. And I don't mean myth is history. I mean the urban legends and the fake facts and all of that. And that truthiness is prevalent everywhere. I heard that some chick at the Kroger trying
The
to
CIA
do,
myth.
yeah, the CIA myths. I heard a chick trying to tell a guy that he couldn't buy the beer because the guy next to him didn't have a driver's license, and this was FDA law. And I'm like, there's no way that this chick at the freaking Kroger is like a law, proficient at the law. And that's the era we now live in. It's a very soft, plushy, what's real, what's not real.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do serious scientific work. And if you do, you're damned on one side or you're damned on the other. If you're libertarian, you're an alt-right troll to the far left, and you're a liberal enabler to the right. And that's a very difficult position to be in if all you're after is objective truth. That's my rant.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the millennial generation too. What is different about millennial generation is they're heavily into cancel culture. Oh, that's just stupid.
Yeah.
And then and then all the other all the rest of the herd will go, yeah, that's stupid. Let's just dismiss this altogether because it's coming from a boomer and the boomers are stupid. So like this cancel culture thing too, that's like, wait, hold on a second. For me personally, this is just my story. So in 81, I may have been 12 or, about 12 years old or so. And we're in geography class, and our geography teacher flips out. How I remember the years, because Steelers were going for one for the thumb in 81 and for Super Bowl rings, and Sadat died. That was a big deal. And he came into class and he ranted one day about Velikovski. He was mad that he could not teach us what he wanted to teach us and what he should be teaching us because the school systems wouldn't allow him to do it. Now, if it wasn't for Mr. Plaza, not Mr. Plaza, it was Mr. Plaza. Mr. Plaza did that, and I was like, whoa. So whenever it did come more forward to where we are now, and I was like, hey, I never considered Immanuel Velikovski. I at least knew who the guy was. You know what I'm saying? I at least was like, hey, Mr. Plaza, and these Vietnam era guys would all hang out together in our town and play softball, and they go to the Y, and they were in volleyball leagues and such. Well, my uncle had journals in his house, and I'm like, I didn't know what this stuff was, and it didn't seem very interesting. But hey, these guys were into that stuff, and if it weren't for the boomers, I wouldn't know anything about Velikovski at all, or, I would have been probably just combing the internet and say, hey, who's this guy right here? But I wasn't dismissive of things just because of how I felt inside. I was like, no, we're always inquisitive. We're like Rick's a little older. We're from that generation of taking things apart, radios, stereo receivers, and we went from Pong to Atari, from Atari to ColecoVision, and it went to Sega Genesis, and from pagers to
but
cell
not to be
phones.
too much of a to a lot of these kids that we're talking about, the fact that you were able to do that is somehow dangerous. And here also, you being a black man doing it has to be controlled because you might be hurt by the white man's electronics. And what the hell? I don't understand their mentality. I am here to tell them, like, the limit of my free speech is clear and present danger, and the limit of your free speech is also clear and present danger. So you need to be careful who you step to with this craziness. You go throwing red paint on me, you're going to get a paint can upside the head.
Well, I got a gripe too.
But I would like, Sean, for you to go on a little bit more about how that was like growing up with that kind of electronics, because it also
Yeah, I mean,
it's the
look,
same
I hate
basic era
hang on,
that was
I-
the era of Wal's prime.
yeah, like
my gripe is that when I was a kid, I only had freaking Pong.
yeah, we had Pong, dude.
That's it.
Bing, me
Nope.
and my sister would play
The
Pong.
only video games there was Pong.
Yeah.
And then later on, Asteroids.
Yep.
Right.
That's why the older generation is so angry.
and Rick, we would sit there and you try to make the ball
ahead,
go
Chuck.
straight across, and you'd line up. Me and my sister would try to line up the little lines and just have the ball go boing, 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 just go straight. I mean, that's all we could do. Like
I
even,
loved playing Asteroids and
goodness
Frogger,
gracious.
personally.
So we're even
All right,
from
so
the
that was retro
back
to
to
you.
okay. So no,
These
no,
are
it
just-
wasn't. That was my childhood in the '80s. That
these
was
are
all there
just
was
examples.
for
So-
me in
so
Kentucky.
back in the-
Remember, I'm from Kentucky.
Right.
Back in the days, I'm a DJ and I'd be DJing and it's like, I blew a fuse. You don't have a fuse. What do? Take the old fuse out. You always had aluminum foil with you, and just RCA jack wires and just cut a piece of copper wire off. You're guessing at that point, with the amps of the fuse. Just put a copper wire and wrap aluminum foil around the copper wire, plug it back in, and you can get through the day or the night or whatever it was. We're just from that generation. Hey, fix it now, or everything's
Yeah.
gonna. That's it.
You
We're the
guys all
generation-
didn't always throw things away. See, these days it's very
No,
easy to
we
just
would
throw
we
away
would
an
we would
electronic.
we
You
would
actually
trash
try and-
pick. During our spring cleanup days, you could trash pick speakers and turntables and stuff. People would throw things away that they probably shouldn't even been thrown away, just trying to get it out their house. Like, man, everybody had records. Rick grew up in that era too. We had records. We didn't have downloads. You had to go to the store and buy 50 cents or a 99-cent 45.
I still got mine.
Here you go. We're just from a different era. But okay, another example.
Well, but I want to make it
Nowadays,
crystal clear.
Everything is working for this generation.
Before
me
going
growing
forward,
up-
hold on. Before you go
ahead.
forward, I want to make
Go
it
ahead.
clear to the audience that the reason this is relevant is at the time that Wal and Dave and all those guys were in their physical primes, this is the reality of what was happening. The electronics culture and the debug and of the building and all of those things, that was like new. I mean, crystal radios and stuff existed since the early 20th century, but it wasn't a common experience. Not everyone owned a TV. I know it's hard for the kids to understand this. Not everyone had a TV. There was no cable internet. There was no cable TV. And so if you experienced electronics, you were kind of a weird nerd. Like, you were very different. Like, if you're Steve Jobs and stuff, you're very weird. So here comes Wal Thornhill and crew, and they're seeing everything as electric. It seems so obvious to us now because everything is electric. But back then, it wasn't obvious to everybody at the time. It was a major paradigm shift because they had been taught that there was two things. Gravity runs the universe, but the atomic bomb will kill you. That was their reality that they grew up in. Okay.
Yeah. No, like even just for example, when I was in college, in my undergraduate years, we were doing studio editing. Okay, we'd have studio cameras, and we'd have a board, and we'd have two
So the cameras were analog?
big old analog cameras,
Right,
like
correct.
big old
They
super
weren't-
big, huge cameras, and wires everywhere.
Chemical.
And we'd be recording and editing. You have two super VHS recorders, and you have Sony editing software. Nowadays, everybody has iMovie. Everybody has a cell phone with a camera on it. This stuff was studio grade. It wasn't commercially accessible until the camcorders came out in the 80s, and then the camcorders eventually had VCR tapes, and then they became much smaller. Now everybody has cell phone cameras. Everybody, you can make a movie,
Right? But it's
and
all
have a place-
digital, though. It doesn't. It's
all
not that
digital.
chemical magnetic
The-
experience
right.
that you're talking about.
The digital era has changed things, and it's like, whoa. And I've seen it happen before my very eyes. I mean, I have to keep up with some of the technology, of course, but it's like, whoa. We went from the stone ages of electronics to where we are now, where everything's digital. In fact, some guys told me about this program called OBS, where we're on Facebook Messenger in a video conference, and these guys have all their studio equipment talking to each other. One guy's halfway across the country in one city with a piano. This other guy's like in Louisiana with a guitar, and I'm like, what the heck? And we can see each other, talk, and they can record music. unbelievable, man. I'm just like, wow, you back in the 80s and 90s, like even with rap groups, you had to have this equipment available to be able to make music. And it was very expensive. Very expensive. I mean, it was like we were in a like an exclusive fraternity. If you had turntables and drum machines and 8-track recorders, like you had something that nobody else really had. Nowadays, everybody has it. Everybody has apps and programs that make music on cell phones.
It's easy to take for granted now. Is the point.
Like what the heck, man? Unbelievable. And so,
if I could just say something real quick, that what you guys are talking about here, and what Ramon brought up, is that back when Wal and Don Scott and David Talbott and everybody was back in their physical prime, they started realizing everything was electric. Because that's what we were tinkering with. We were tinkering with electric. So they realized they took that up as above, so below concept, and they're like, wow, it's an electric universe. Now fast forward to our children in our generation and even younger, and you have a movie that came out called The Matrix. There was never a movie that came out that was the electric universe that blew everybody's mind. That's what the Thunderbolts Project has been doing.
Yes.
Now you fast forward and you have the simulation hypothesis, that it's a simulated universe, because that's what we're working with now. We're working with programs and computers. So it's easy to say,
excuse me.
Back in the mechanical universe, when we were in mechanical, everyone said that the universe is like a machine, right? Because we're working with machines all day long and we see the similarities. Then it's electrical because we're working with electrical all day long and we see the similarities. Now a lot of people think it's a computer program that we're living in, because that's what we're working with. And they're all true. They're all partially true, to some degree. And what's going to be next? I always thought that colored TV was the greatest thing, and there could never be a better invention as far as like propelling that information to people. Then the internet came out.
Then they came out with plasma TVs. I think plasma is the next.
Yeah, TVs are now computers that have
Yes.
TV programming, but they're actually just computers.
So what's next? Is it ChatGPT? Is it? Are we going to start saying that the universe is AI because we're going to start working so closely with AI? I mean, this is interesting.
It is. It's bringing us closer to the Mimsical discussion I want to have. I want to let Sean finish his thoughts on that era and bringing it full scale, because I do want the kids to understand Wal. He's an old boomer. He's passed away. Why is it important? Well, it's important because, as Buddy just pointed out, that was revolutionary. And Sean is illuminating to something here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like even when they first got started, what is it, the 94 they did a Velikovski symposium? I guess it was around 94.
Yeah, it was like a memorial.
That's when the internet first started,
yeah.
okay? So I always would complain to Michael Armstrong that you guys took too long to get this thing moving, and you're old now. Hate to say it that way. But then look at how they gained momentum. The books were released in about 2004-ish, about 2004, 2005. I have them somewhere here in the house. And then we fast forward to about, we'll say 2012-ish, when YouTube is popular and you're able to go on YouTube and watch these guys. If we don't have that tool, then you have to obviously get their information through journals. The old school. You're mailing, you're getting journals mailed to your house. That's how you would have to get the information. Now, with the shortcut of the internet, you're able to go on and see these guys. Whereas if the technology and with these boomers was what it was in 74, 84, 94, we would probably not even know about these guys.
Let me jump in there for a second. I want to tell the audience something. 2023 is the year you completely stop trusting. Do not trust Popular Mechanics and other science journals. I'm going to do a paper as soon as the Bing search is ready. I'm going to actually have Bing write a paper about how untrustworthy Bing and ChatGPT and AI is, and how dangerous it is. because of the lack of actual fact that will be believable when kids who are being taught wrong information purposely then go and utilize these AIs to write even worse information, and it becomes called science. And I'm going to facilitate. Actually, ChatGPT and Bing are going to be the author, and I'm going to get a byline. So look forward to that later on this year, folks. I'm going to get the AI to prove that it itself is a bad idea, and it won't even be that hard. It's going to be it's going to be a blast. So just letting you know, that's going to be on its way, and that will be a major paper. It won't be a messy. It'll be a like a main paper, and I will go through and add the citations on its behalf, since it'll make assertions that people are considering fact. It's going to be a riot. I'm going to have a lot of fun with that. There's going to be sub experiments inside of the paper, little thought things where it's going to contradict itself. So on one hand, it'll have some kind of super left thing, and on the other hand, it'll write some extremely alt-right Nazi-sounding poem about taking over, killing all the government officials, and saving the motherland. You just wait; it'll be hilarious, and then I will put that out there, of course, on Academia and probably even ResearchGate, because we won't be able to stop the fake science revolution that's going to come from these AI, but we will be able to make them hilarious. It'll be like memes, but instead of 2016 politics, it'll be 2023 AI. So fun stuff. Who on any other thought? Because I want to get into what Buddy started to tunnel.
Yeah,
he's done a good job.
I want to land the plane real quick. Just land the plane. So the boomers, why the younger, X and Y should look at the boomers in a different light, is because they were more sophisticated than I was, and then the generations thereafter. Why do I say that? Again, they didn't have the internet. How did they compile their books? They didn't go on and Google search anything. They'd have to go to the library. They'd have to start in the reference section to build their ideas and what have you. Then they go in and they start deep diving into books, the real physical books. They couldn't do research by pushing buttons and asking Google to help them out. No, they had to do it the old school way. That takes time. That takes effort. Heck, Wal would get boxes of books shipped from Portland back to Australia. There's a big bookstore up there they always talk about. And Wal would be in the States, and he would get boxes of books, and then they'd ship them back to Australia, whenever, before he would go home, he'd ship them back to Australia. He wasn't using Google. These guys weren't Googling everything. They were actually going to the library, and they were actually doing the research that way. Last point, even a guy like me, I download some music. Yes, I do. I have thousands upon thousands of records. I'd have to go to record stores and dig in those boxes of records, usually all day long, to find what I wanted. Sit there, play a song. Yep, I want this here. It's just things are done different now. It makes life easier for us, but it also makes us lazy. I complain a lot because I'm a DJ, and everything is done manually. You have to match the tempos of records manually to transition to the next song. Nowadays, the programs do it for you. You don't even have to touch anything. You just push a button, and it locks tempos in. And a DJ doesn't even need turntables, for goodness sakes. You just need a digital controller. And
you don't even have to sing. You just hit a button and it's auto tune.
It's like, whoa, man, this is like, it's making us lazy.
It's lazy.
Probably making us not as talented.
Yeah, it's lowering our IQ. We don't have to think anymore.
Well, I remember, to this exact point, I remember when computers came out. I mean, another example of what you guys are talking about here is the operating systems. To make us lazy not make us lazy, but that has been the result. And
do a lot less programming, that's for sure.
Yeah, I remember specifically having nothing but a green, cursor at the top left-hand corner when my computer started up, and you had to give it all of its commands.
I have a funny story.
Back in the day, but now even the operating systems that come in, it's a pre-program through all the, to apply and help with all of these different things. Now it's helpful in multiple ways, just like, Sean, you're talking about, you got guys in multiple places all across the country being able to record music and do it inexpensively. So there is, in my mind, great things that can be, produced and provided in terms of, human, creativity through these things. It's just the fact that it's been, unfortunately, so utilized in such a negative way in order to maintain certain levels of control is the issue.
Let me tell you guys a hilarious story. My son, he loves escape rooms. So last October, we went to do an escape room, and he chose a one that was very, very retro. And the first room that you start out is the 1960s room, and they have I Love Lucy on the television. It's only little clips and stuff. But so these kids, they got a hold of one of those telephones, and they could not figure out how to dial the phone number. And then the kids went over to the television, and I mean, they were like banging on the controls because they were expecting it to result to like they were touching the screen, and they were touching the controls because they were expecting the electronic to automatically react to what they're doing. And it was a wonderful moment of getting to teach them. And then when they got to the 1970s kitchen, I mean, they went crazy ballistic. They loved it because it was information that they suspected, but it's not, they've seen it on TV, but actually to them to interact with these things, a cookbook. I mean, there was more energy in that room. The energy went down when they got to the 1980s. They relegated to a wall, like it was terrible. But in the 1990s, they got there, and there were movie posters and toys and Legos and things that they were very much more familiar with, and their energy started to calm. The hyperactivity went way down. So when they interacted with the old technology, their energy levels went through the roof to the point where they couldn't even work together in a cohesive manner. And then as they went, it like calmed way down, and they began to actually solve the puzzles themselves very rapidly. It was just now they were out of time because it took so long. It took probably more than half the time for them to get through the 1960s and 70s rooms than it was to get through the 1990s and the 2000s with the electronics and the things moving around, the bright lights and all that stuff. And then they were playing this, I guess, energetic techno like music the whole time. It reminded me of game show music, but like designed to make you spend money. It was a fantastic experience just watching these little kids, Zoomers, all of them are Zoomers, trying to interact with a freaking analog telephone, and you have to explain. And they couldn't wait for it to go all the way back. So then they try and jam their finger in and go, from there, and then they have to start over. It took easily 10 minutes for them to dial this phone number and get the information out of it.
It's hilarious, man.
It was.
It's funny. It's funny they had "I Love Lucy" there as an example. I don't know if you guys.
Yeah, well, it alternated. There was some Dick Van Dyke, but you were only supposed to see specific scenes, and then you would go to another one. Then the clues came off of that. It was. I would definitely do it again, except for now, of course, I'm not going to pay for a bunch of kids since I already know how to get out of it. But they didn't solve it. They didn't actually escape because they lost so much time. And just imagine if their world was electronically taken away from them, they're going to be even more screwed than we would have been if the electronics disappeared back in the 90s or 2000s. Their dependence on software to make decisions for them to run the electronics is very key. I don't think that they can understand how a power substation works unless they had very specific formal training. Whereas Wal's generation, if the zombie apocalypse hit, his generation, a certain number of them out of 10 men, 4 of them probably could have gone into a substation and restored power rudimentarily. I don't think 1 in 10 men could today. I'm sure it's probably more like 4 in 100 if they were forced to. A lot of the young men can't even work on cars. And there's a massive percentage of them that can't even change a tire or a wheel. I mean, to swap out.
That's real bad.
It is really bad. Like that's bad for survival 101 kind of discussion, resiliency. And it's a result of the success of the leveraging of the Mims and the thing I just posted, the triple Mims. which we never had a discussion of. So I think is worth me actually sharing that on the screen so that we can talk about it.
Real quick, man. Sorry, I'll throw
Go
a
ahead.
little quick sidebar here on the I Love Lucy thing. I was doing some stuff further on that Mandela effect conversation we had. How many guys here remember the phrase, Lucy, you got some splaining to do, and I Love Lucy?
I mean, I remember generally, but it's more, I think, a cultural thing. I never heard him say, Lucy, you have some splaining to do. I just heard you have some splaining to do. So
Right, never said it. Never, not one time. Never,
man,
never
I
said
swear
it.
to God, I've said. Hold on, let me
Yeah, just
actually
go, please pull up a video of that taking place.
Well, I don't know about
Never
videos. I'm
happened.
gonna DuckDuckGo it. Let's.
Yeah.
I
He actually gives out a long kind of like, okay, well, you please need to explain that to me. Kind of, that's how it's phrased. That's how he worded it. And either whether we culturally bastardized it, I don't know, through time. But man, that's a tough one to get my head around, to be honest with you, because I remember, or I feel I have the memory. I can't say for sure because it was so long ago, of hearing him come into the room, seeing him, and him walking in the room and say, Lucy, that whole phrase, you got some explaining to do. That is the phrase, but it's never found. You can't find him actually saying it. At Desi Arnaz.
That is a meme. Hold on. There's people with YouTube videos, but let's see if we can actually find. Sorry, it's very loud. I apologize. It's very loud. You guys can hear that or no?
No.
No, you can't hear it. Hold on. I'll put it in the window that I think is being shared. Okay, do you see it now? Is that visible?
Yeah, it's visible
Okay.
now.
All right. Let's see if you can hear it now. Let's see what in our current reality. Ricky never told me this, so why do we all remember the saying? What is this? What is that nonsense?
Yeah, this is examples in modern times of other movies that referenced it in the movies, but yet you never.
Okay, I see it.
Never actually have
this one's not
actually saying
right. Okay. He said that line at least 10 to 20 episodes. I'm sure of it. Okay, let's. If you can find and post them, I'll give you an immediate subscribe. Okay, it's called the Mandela effect. Right. Nope, you never said it once. Okay, people are arguing back and forth what they remember. I mean, I feel like I remember him saying it at least once, if not 3 times, but he said it at least twice per episode and fought in Korea. Okay, I don't know how that's relevant. Let's see. I'm on DuckDuckGo, by the way. That Ricky never said. Lucy, you guys, look at this. The famous lines commonly assumed have been said by Lucille Ball. Okay. So I mean, he did say similar lines. Okay, Lucy, splain. All right, start splaining. Right. That's what. Okay, so probably I've heard him say splain, and then and it was like, oh, okay, this is the modified version of what he really said. And then the truth is, we've modified what he really said into a catchphrase. That's interesting.
I don't know, man.
I think that's my interesting.
It's a tough one, but it goes back to the overarching kind of concept of the Mandela effect. It's what is the collective consciousness actually retaining and not retaining, and are their timelines being changed? That's the other important question.
Is this guy going to actually say anything? Okay, hold on.
I don't know, buddy, Sean, what do you guys remember?
Well, that one's a little more obscure, but we've talked about this. Many people bring up different things like what movie was Sinbad, the comedian, in? Was he in the movie?
Shazam, yeah.
Yeah.
He was. I know that he was because my brother was a big Sinbad fan as a child, and I remember when that movie came out, you
I'm not
know,
able to hear.
going and trying to find it for him.
I'm not able to hear.
I remember doing that. That's an event I remember clearly that Sinbad played in that movie.
All right, hold on, guys. It's almost over.
We can't hear it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them though. The Mandela effect is real. Like, what?
I think it's just us remembering things differently.
Hold on it's almost over, guys. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, here's an interesting thing. So here's where the racism aspect comes in, because in the episode where he's actually saying that she has some explanation to, he says explanation. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Not sure if it's exactly relevant to what we were going to discuss.
No, not at all.
Jonathan, I feel like you just threw a distraction in. What the heck?
Sorry, it was more a matter because it was one that they put in the game or inside of the safe room.
I was like, where is this coming from? Because it's like completely left field discussion.
Well, it's just, it was an on of all the shows that they could have selected from that time, that was the one that they selected. That's all.
If we could,
well, yeah, but it's an iconic. They also had what's that, Dick Van Dyke, and one other one that wasn't that incredibly popular. It wasn't Flipper or something. It was something else. I can't remember what it was. But the 3 different shows, and there was a clue from each of those. I mean, Lucy is a pretty iconic show, especially because it started off black and white and ended up in color. That's a, I mean, her success, of course, greatly going against the typical curve at the time, and then becoming this gold standard. Then suddenly there were lots of women who are successful as leads. I think probably factors in as why people still remember it so wholeheartedly. Whereas here you want to talk about an anti-Mandela effect. It's like no one talks about the Cosby Show or Fat Albert. You're not allowed to. Bill Cosby is persona non grata now. So how dare you? They will never put the Cosby Show on Nick at Night or anything like that. And if they can, they'll wipe it from existence, which I think is incredibly problematic for lots of reasons. But anyways, sidebar. So we were talking. Buddy I can't remember exactly how Buddy phrased it, but we were going to get into the above, as above, so below. And that gets back to the triple Mims. Buddy, did you want to tunnel us back into the thought you were having at the time?
Yeah. Let me hone us in here. So what we were talking about is during the industrial age, the zeitgeist of the times believed that we started to understand that, hey, the universe is mechanical. It operates like a machine. Look, just like what our hands are doing, this is how the universe is. It has to be a mechanical universe. Then we go into the electric universe and we start putting electric probes and electricity into everything. And then the people of the day were all like Wal Thornhill. They realized, whoa, this is an electric universe. Everything is electric. It has to be an electric universe. Let's prove this.
Right.
Then you fast forward and you have people working on computers. In the movie The Matrix, there wasn't a big movie that I know of that came out trying to explain to the universe, hey, or explain to people, hey, the universe is a machine. I know there were philosophers talking about it. That was around Nietzsche's day and Freud, and thinking everything's mechanistic. So
right.
That there wasn't a movie about that. There wasn't a movie about the electric universe, about everything being electric. But then,
well, hold on, you're not completely right there. Metropolis is the movie that was the whimsical expression, but it had to summarize everything of the 1800s up, and they also get into their future, what they thought the future would look like, and it was
Right.
technically also the first dystopian film, Metropolis. If people haven't seen it, go see it. It's obviously a silent film.
So take this idea and bring it to, I think 1999. I don't know when The Matrix came out, but the Wachowski brothers, or sisters now, whatever, they came out with this movie trying to explain that everything is a simulation. Everything is it's a computer. The computers run everything, and this is futurism. These are futurist thoughts. And now people, a lot of kids and a lot of people believe that we live in a simulated universe or a multiverse. So fast forward a little bit further to today and the big boom with ChatGPT, and how it seems like every time we get our hands into something, we see the mirror image around us, and we start to think in terms of the universe being
Right.
Electric, being digital, being AI. So is the next one going to be the universe is AI, God is AI? And then let me take that thought of all those together and then go beyond that. Before all of these technologies existed, and you have books. You have books. God is the author. The universe has to write this into existence. You get sort of ideas like intelligent design came up and then was squashed because that wasn't allowed to be a thing. We weren't allowed to see that there was an intricate design and geometry to everything. The scholars didn't want us to believe that. For whatever reason, they wanted us to believe something else. That something else is probably simulation theory and a simulated universe, because we might be able to be more under control. And the idea of intelligent design implies a creator or a designer. So they squashed that idea because that's whoever's in control doesn't want us to think that way. But you take all these ideas and you go back into the 1800s, 1700s. What's happening here is that we're mirroring our view and our zeitgeist based off of the technology of the day. That's it. And you go back, what did they have? What was the technology back then? Books. What was the technology also before all written word? Spirituality, angels. So they spoke in terms of these energies that they could feel and that they knew existed around them. So we try to explain the universe with the technology of the day. That's
correct. And now you've tunneled in directly. I will only want to replace the word technology with Mims, and on account of the fact that technology is a Mims, and so it can lubricate a lot of these kinds of Mimsicalities, but it didn't have to be a technology that they used. As you pointed out, it could be their spirituality or prayer or chanting. You were talking about Om earlier, right? Om is not a technology, but it was some type of Mims that they were using, and there are still people to this day that think that they were using that sound to move giant stones. Whether or not there's evidence for that is irrelevant. The fact that people still think that. And also, people still think that the Bible is the literal word of God. Now, you can tell them and you can explain to them calmly and rationally. It might be the inspired word of God, but it was obviously written by people, and they really struggle with that. So there is a literal aspect of what you're talking about. So the triple Mims concept, which has been released for about a week, maybe 2 weeks, is that we start off wherever we are in our origin point in the center. Now the degree of that circle is going to greatly depend on, in all frankness, the worldliness of the parents. If your parents are Bubba and Bertha, you're probably not going to know a lot about anything. You're probably going to know a whole lot about spam and cable TV, but not a whole lot about much of anything. If you're lucky, Bubba and Bertha actually do some hunting or something. You might actually know something about your actual environment, but you might have grown up in a trailer or in the ghetto or in the barrio and not know much about anything. But the system, whether it's public education or the mainstream science, it gives you information that it deems is safe for you to know, and as safe as in keeps it safe from you becoming too well educated and too able to overthrow it, or to counter the powers that be. And that forms your first bubble. From there, most people find one of three directional axes in order to chase. Some end up on the spiritual development, of which, good Lord, how many of them end up in the headed south direction by choosing some cult because they're vulnerable at the age at which this happens. But many of them do end up, for example, like Buddy, in a true spiritual growth factor. But the difference is, Buddy has also focused a great deal of energy in the mystery and secrets awareness. And once again, there's a negative aspect of that too. You can go, what is the Matrix, all the way down to destroying your life. There's a whole movie, Mel Gibson movie, where the conspiracy theorist, and it turns out he is right, and then they try to kill him. That does happen to people. They become such a conspiracy theorist that they end up either destroying life or their life is destroyed. And then there are people who, I think this is the vast majority of the population, focus heavily on career and social progress. That it is where they think that life is supposed to evolve, this x-axis. And the only downside to that is the bubble, it really only allows you to expand so far in that, so long as you don't threaten the status quo socially, the class and caste systems, which creates a massive frustration for us capitalists. It's like, well, if capitalism works, then how come we can't break through? Well, if that's all you make your life about, you're going to be really sad when you're one of the 7,000 people fired at Disney, or here locally, by the way, Jonathan, might be an opportunity for us. Salesforce fired almost everyone under Molly's brother. He didn't get fired, but they fired almost everyone. So there are some people out there, sales-minded people, whose life is being upended because of real market forces that aren't admitted on the political level, because, by God, we can't admit the truth out there that there's a recession and that the hyperinflation is beginning to take hold. But it's really a reality that they're facing. And this actually killed my cousin's husband. He was a scientist. He was a volcanologist at a couple of colleges in California. And one of his projects that he'd worked really hard, obviously, on, when it got chopped. He got the chopping block because of the shrinkage that is occurring in California, economically speaking. And he ended up on the streets, and he OD'd, and he died from drug use. And really interesting whimsical situation, because his son is only a few days different in age than my son. And the vast difference of the viability of his science to save his life versus my science, from a whimsical perspective, is very obvious. And the effect it has on his son to not have his father anymore is also very obvious. And so people who focus completely on that axis, there is a very limited range of development. But there's so much danger on the Y and Z axis, that our society doubles back, and even with the Christians, tries to make everything about your monetary progression. And I think that does a very massive disservice, because of the sheer facts of what Buddy's talking about, is that in every era, there are new mysteries and secrets that await, particularly through technology, as he was saying, that define how we're looking at the universe. And all of us are trying to find a way out of that limiting bubble, while not, obviously, the good people not heading south, and then just generally not dying from that progression. There are some people who are willing to press the line. I always find it interesting. I'm watching 24, the people who become traders or double agents. And what it is, obviously, is that they're willing to do whatever possible to advance their career and social progress in real dollar senses, and that they have abandoned any sense of moral or spiritual development, and they don't really care about mystery and secrets awareness, except in the use of secrets to hide their nefarious agendas. And there's a lot of people like that. The temptation is very, very high, and it can damage a lot of lives if people remain shallow along the x-axis and don't engage in the y and z axes that are necessary to actually make you into a full human, and also not a slave of the limitations imposed upon the bubble. So that's my thought there. As far as for Buddy's concept that who knows what the next way we will define what God is. I think it's very obvious the AI is going to be involved. Obviously, the exercise of the Mims philosophy is for us to try and get ahead, figure that out. So I'd like to also challenge the group to take Buddy's question and actually next level that, leverage it, and let's figure out if because humans, they're not necessarily smart, but they're smart enough to know they're being lied to. They're going to start to say, well, deep fakes, I can't trust whatever's on the TV. And fake audio. I mean, I watched the other day. It was hilarious. It was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he was playing the role. I can't remember the movie, but it was, he was female. His voice was perfectly done. Obviously, it wasn't really his voice. It wasn't really his face. It wasn't even the right movie. It wasn't even the right gender, and it was hilarious. But it underscored to me that if people are going to trust that at these fake debates, when they don't have some character as ridiculously unreal as Trump up there, these might not even be really happening. These debates could be staged at different times, everything prearranged, the questions all given ahead.
Yeah, they could be written by AI. I mean,
they could be written by AI, and you wouldn't even know. In 50 years,
I want to make a point.
Let's say it's the same. You could even just have Joe Biden again, and these kids wouldn't know the difference. They just think it was the same Joe Biden, and it wouldn't be real. Which is the movie Equilibrium that happens. Father is a deepfake AI. That movie came out the same year as The Matrix. Point of contention there. Go ahead.
Yeah, just the Matrix is actually written by a black woman, and it was supposedly to be the Terminator series. John Connor moved into Neo in the Matrix series, so it was like a 6-part, kind of like how Star Wars was, but that was the intent originally. So if you're asking the question of what's next, I think they presented it, but they just did it in different, like they did the Star Wars, 2 different Star Wars trilogies. They did it in non-sequential order. So you're looking at what's next, where you have a great example of what at least they think, or at least want the collective consciousness to think, in terms of what's going on with the Terminator movie versus the Matrix. So just an interesting point there.
Well, this is all such a really interesting discussion, and I think this helps spread awareness of, don't be closed in the loops of the current zeitgeist. I don't fully believe in the electric universe. I don't think it's all electric. I think that we don't have all the puzzle pieces. Of course, the more you know you don't know. I don't think it's gravity, and I don't think it's all a simulation. I think it's a two-way, pulsating, perturbation, living universe. And the geometry of Walter Russell shows this. When are we going to think? I mean, Nietzsche said God is dead, right? Obviously, Stephen Hawking agrees. God is dead. And Einstein said, does God roll dice? Is that because we know that life is a gamble, and God gamble?
He specifically said God doesn't roll dice. He was very sure. And Niels Bohr said, stop telling God what to do, which was a very hilarious retort. And but in another 100 years, Niels Bohr will be giving Einstein a blowjob and asking whether or not God likes dice or something. I mean, they'll rearrange everything,
right?
Rather than remain to the historical facts,
right?
And I think you're pointing out like that might be so natural that we will have a hard time pinpointing a quote what it really is.
Yep.
It'll always be skewed by a cultural filter.
Yep. And whether the book says one thing, society will have you believe the other, and that's where you get the Mandela effect. Whatever the mass form psychosis, whatever the masses tell you, that's what we roll with. Did Bart say, "Eat your shorts, man"? I don't know, but I want to say I remember him saying, "Eat my shorts."
Yeah, he would say, "Eat my shorts."
Eat my shorts.
I think that speaks to the energetic field with which we all contribute to on a daily basis. And we go back to the concept of books and the power of imagination that goes into an actual, process of reading a book and then picturing the words into real life, of making the pictures for ourselves in our mind. Books had such a much more powerful resonance, I think, in terms of the ethos, but yet they were able to be consumed at a lower number. So when the esoteric powers that be, the controllers that know this esoteric knowledge and have the ability to control the flow and ebb of, the tide of that kind of energetic flow, they then put it into movies that can be consumed in mass by, just millions and millions and millions of people instantaneously. So it's a matter of the speed with which there's, Hollywood, the casting of the spells. You go back, like, for instance, a great example, you just brought up Stephen Hawking. Yeah, but you go back into the 60s and you read Isaac Asimov's Foundation trilogy and you see the same character. The same mathematical genius in a wheelchair providing insight for all of humanity. These manifested things into reality. Whether it was done esoterically or whether it was done through the controllers, I can't say, but I'm telling you, man, it's a reality we're faced with.
I think it's just anecdotal facts that don't really mean too much in our lives, so we just roll with it. It's like, who cares if she said this or that? Like in the future, Ramon raised a good point. The whatever Google says happened, whatever Google says Einstein said is what Google's going to say and what everybody's going to believe, because you won't be able to get the book yourself. And then by that time, the digital copy is going to be changed. And the history is being rewritten right now, and that's why statues are being destroyed. And almost every artist that I love, Google it. People, I don't know who's doing this, but they're saying that they're gay. They're saying Van Gogh was gay because he had a brother or a friend that he trusted in with all of his artwork. Does that mean he's gay?
It's just an obsession. Yeah.
It's an obsession to rewrite history and to make everybody's perception think that hey, all the greatest people throughout history were gay.
So,
Christians might have already done this. Christians could have already done this and said that all the good scientists were Christian.
Well, this did happen with the Satan. There's a whole documentary about that. So one thing you missed because you just weren't on the thing is that we had a whole GPT conversation about the codes of control on this issue. Because what had happened is in this triple Mims paper, I had actually multiplied with linear mathematics these two matrices, the plasma electromagnetic force and the unified ether field by who, what, where, when, why, how, and out popped a code, the G plus T plus P. And we went and did a whole search on GPT, and it's going to turn out to be its own paper that's coming in the future about the GPT code. But we were on about how we can't tell, though. Do the people over there who wrote Chat GPT understand that GPT is a special code based on science? Probably not. But the collective consciousness, which is not an artificial intelligence here, unless it's a synthetic intelligence, not sure. This collective consciousness knows that these different areas that GPT became a part of, and that continued throughout the week. In fact, Jonathan ended up looking into glutamate protein, and so we ended up finding all this GPT connection of things that's happening now, and it was probably as close to finding matrix code as with philosophy ether, that is, that I think has ever happened. Wouldn't you say, Jonathan? Like we got about, it felt really close to finding literal matrix code around us. And it was from doing these same mimsical analyses that we're right now currently engaging in on this call. I don't know if the audience is picking up on that, and I honestly don't know if Wal Thornhill would have understood. But I think it's really cool that on an episode that's memorialization for Wal and thankfulness for him, that we are getting back into that subject, because Buddy's research suggests the same thing. It's not to say, again, Buddy's making very clear, he's not saying it's a simulation, but there are these membranes, and we're exploring those membranes, and they seem heavily related to consciousness, which is exactly built into the big G, because you brought up the G earlier. It's built into the big G diagram. Out of the void, the flow hits the Lord energy first, and the Lord means consciousness. Consciousness everywhere and throughout everything. So the integration of those things. Now that leads to the new paper discussion about external memory and feng shui. And I will share the pain that I had this morning, whatever this weather went through. And also I was face down, which typically if I'm sleeping face down, something getting pinched, I do tend to end up having one of these astral nightmares. It wasn't really a nightmare, though. I mean, not in a true sense. It was like a remote house, and there was rain going into this house. And I thought about the renting, and I was like, oh, this landlord lady, she's let this roof not get fixed. And I go upstairs, and then suddenly I was in this room. And this room, it was more like my inner child's memory storehouse. There were trophies, and there were video game systems, but the thing that hit me were my children's toys. Now, I don't know if they were really my children's toys or if they were an alternate Ramon's children's toys. And there were kids' drawings. And the guy that I'm watching, me in this dream, loses it, absolutely loses it about the divorce. Absolutely. Then my two sons, my oldest two sons, appeared through the door, and the big one hugs me, and I knew it was his spirit. And when I woke, I was, of course, first thing, it's like, thank God, like in the dream, I was thinking, she would never deal with this. But the pain was this deep, real pain. It was as if someone had really stuck me with a screwdriver right through my heart and twisted it with this Phillips screwdriver. And I really felt, when I woke up, my first thought was, thank God I'm laying here back in my reality. My second thought was, I could hear him caterwauling still of the pain of having failed the children, and something about the external memory of these objects. And obviously in the dream, he was going to deal with the clutter of them building up from, the divorce and all that. And he was going to give them to the children. But the pain of it was so excruciatingly real. That's what I'm saying, is that it caused me to burst into tears. Now, there was obviously an electrical setup for all this, number one. And then number two, it led to the final thought, if there's a version of me out there who has a more perfect life, if there's an alternate quantum data stream, am I, and the suffering that we're all going through together with these code controls and what's been done, am I the nightmare for that guy? And it gave me compassion for the potential other version of me somewhere else. Then I watched Cassie on Popcorn in Bed react to Galaxy Quest, and that was much better. But the point is, the pain of it was as if the room really existed, and the children's toys were really there, and it was convicting. And I can't help but think that this external memory concept that I'm going into in this paper is super important. Under our normal consciousness, we just call it clutter. I got to rearrange this. I got to clean my desk. I got to, get some stuff out of my living room. I got to buy some shit. I got to donate some shit. I got to clean some shit, But in special states, what I call liquid reality and hyper real, which are both entheogenic states, psychedelics, there is much more rarefication of the information actually being exchanged with those objects, which tells me that they're acting as a membrane of consciousness to reality, that there's a connectative aspect that is actually cohesively real. I think that Buddy's research points exactly to that in an abstract way. And then I think these various theories, I came up with different ways of looking at external memory, and then included also the Chinese way of looking at it, which connected it over to Feng Shui. And this, I think, will somehow, long way around, get us to the technology that we've been talking about, where we can actually read past codes, affect future codes, and see quantum wise either alternate things or real things that have happened in our timeline. The evidence that is impossible to know at the current moment. So that's where I am today.
There should be a vestige, an electrical a fossilized neural network for everything that's ever existed in the universe.
Exactly. Yes. Explain to the audience what you mean, because that is exactly what I think. Say it again, and then explain it.
Right. I've been talking about this for quite some time.
Yeah, you have.
Then I heard for the first time someone else talk about it, and it was a comedian named Duncan Trussell. He said that he was the first one to ever talk about it, because he's never heard anybody talk about it, but he's probably never heard me. So, right. I think 100% that through these Birkeland currents, through the connected universe, through the gestalt of it, the what do they call it? There's a name for it. It's slipping me right now. But every animal, every creature, every living thing on the planet is spinning in the same chirality. Every non-living thing on the planet.
Tell the audience what chirality is. They don't
it's just a direction, right-handedness or left-handedness. It's spinning in a clockwise direction or a counterclockwise direction. This is the same for everything that we found so far in the universe that we know. So this electrical record and this vestige should, and I believe will, be able to be tapped, and most likely it's the geometry of the Doherty set, which is just this. I mean, I'm speaking not with a big head here. I'm speaking from researching it for a long time. And
right, he's not talking out of his ass, people.
This is what led me to believe this to begin with, that it exists, by staring into the abyss of the Doherty set, by staring into the interconnectedness of the connected universe. And I call it the I3. I don't know, that's just what I called it. For lack of a better term, I was calling it the I3 because maybe the Internet 3, who knows? Because they already have Internet 1, Internet 2. They probably already have Internet 6 and 7, and that's what AI is now, whatever. But this idea is that right now, future humans in the future could be passive observers and looking at everything through other creatures' eyes. And the reason why I say passive observers is because you're not allowed to change the timeline. You're not allowed to. I think that there's a parameter that allows us to not interact with the past, but we can mess with the future to some degree, or the present. So I've had this vision, and it came to me from a bird. I was sitting with my friend and looking out the window, and this bird came up to me, and I knew that it was something from the future, or a human from the future observing me and watching me.
Yes.
And these,
it's sort of like the time you know that you need to donate to this homeless person because this is not one of those that are fake. You're being watched. Like, are you a generous person? And you go, you know what? And you look around, you're like, good God, I hope I have some dollars. And you're like, here, take it. Because you know, for whatever reason, with that homeless person, you're being watched. Like, are you a generous person? I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, you get the feeling something's on you, some eye. And I don't mean the evil eye. I mean, like something.
Well, this gets into Rupert Sheldrake.
A portal.
This gets into Rupert Sheldrake's. He talks a lot about this. Is how do you know when someone's watching you? Mm-hmm. That there's a morphic field there. There's a morphic resonance, morphogenetic field of you just have that feeling when someone's watching you. Turn around and boom, sure enough, someone's watching you. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, this could definitely just simply be biophotons. Biophotons, our whole body emits biophotons. They don't only come out of our eye. Our eyes, like when someone stares at you and they give you the death stare and you just feel like cowering up and like falling, collapsing into a jello. Yeah. Like that's biophotons impinging on your biofield.
Yeah, they create a real pressure that is actually palpable. And I utilize this, folks. You don't think Buddy's talking real shit. I use it to coach. And I'm just letting you know, there's a reason I keep winning. Okay? I'm not here to brag. There's a reason I keep winning. I can apply pressure through sound, light, and energy presence in that gym. Everybody knows it. And it's just... I know I'm winning before I get there. That's all I'm saying.
Concentration and focus is charge.
Yes.
It's charge. You're building charge.
But you're exposing me.
That's what meditation is. That's what This is what Walter Russell talked about. You can decentrate and concentrate. And it's a spectrum. Just like sexuality. Sexuality is a spectrum.
Yes.
Same with our thoughts, same with you can focus on good thoughts and good things will happen. You focus on bad thoughts and bad things will happen. You fear, if you're afraid, more bad things are going to happen because fear, some people say, is the opposite of love. Not hate, but fear. And that's why fear is so powerful and why fear needs to be instilled, or why the government deems it necessary that fear needs to be instilled in the people. Because a ruler is more effective if they are feared rather than loved. But they're most effective if they're feared and loved. And that's what Trump has. And there's, whether we like it or not, and he's a master at doublespeak. He says
this one little step further, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
And going down that train of thought,
I'll be right back.
The concept of fear and then the resonating flow, because it happens to operate inside of more of a negative flow, and then that's why it's perpetuated, like you said, so much and so forcefully by the quote controllers or the monopoly men or whoever. But the propagation of so much fear across the world, as we see, like you watch the media and all it is 24/7 fear mongering. The reason for that is if they had the opposite being presented, it would, because they have instilled so many deceptive systems in terms of government, politics, the medical field, science, all of the different fields have been basically set up as deceptive systems. That's why the fear has to go, because they resonate on the same plane of frequency, so to speak, or nearabouts enough to have a resonation occur. Whereas the opposite being love and continuity and, and having, community and all of these things that take place more in a much more powerful field would immediately upset that systematic, deceitful apple cart that they have currently in place, hypothetically speaking. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I know this. I'm sorry, I had to return from the bathroom. I'm going to be using some fear, not exactly fear, but whenever my kids don't do the thing that they should do, in this case, whoever cleaned the bathroom is going to be hand pulling the trash out of the can and then putting a bag in. They're not going to just dump it. it does work in order to create changes in their behavior.
There's a huge difference between respect and fear.
Well, that's true, but I mean, there's a momentary fear. They will fear to touch the garbage, yes, and you can use it as a means to guide behaviors. Is my point. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but in this case, it's a very useful thing, because if I want to create a permanent change in that behavior, if they know the next time that they fail to put that trash bag in, that they're going to be putting their hand in and pulling that stuff out, they will behave differently than if they can get away with it. See, people will kick the can down the road so long as they can, and it's not too painful. But if there's a little bit of pain, in this case, gross pain, then it will create a change in the person. And I think that these code controllers and lying liars that are lying still, the POS supremes, they know that, and they use things like COVID. For them, it's nothing. That's second nature. Of course, you manipulate the masses through, a fake pandemic. Of course you do. Why wouldn't you? It creates all these opportunities to pass the agenda that you want to pass. I personally think that that's the ultimate real use, mimsically. And then there's all the anti-mims that fear brings, because it does destroy love. I think apathy is also one of those things that opposes love. But fear sinks the chi, and it robs us of that life flow, that energy, that vital breath. Fear is very anti-mimsical on the whole. It's only us alchemists that want to turn and use it in a positive manner. I think. I wanted to quickly go through, number one, the different external memory gists that were out of the different theories, and then finally talk about. Yeah, sure. And then, but I'm also, do not let me forget to talk about the chance coincidence section of this paper. Go ahead.
No, just something that I've noticed in, at least my own children and the younger generation is these horror movies and things like this. My daughter started to them as jump scares, as if it was a enjoyable thing to watch these movies, not because they were afraid of it, because it was an enjoyment. So there's the potential that energetic flow has basically been maxed out, so to speak.
There's a possibility, yeah.
Younger generations now coming up find it almost comical to be scared because they are not ingrained with that fear from a young age. They just don't. So it's a useful tactic now, and the quote controllers understand or can can forecast that ultimately they will lose control of these systematic, fear derived systems by the fact that the younger generations are just, more entertained by it than they are.
100 years ago, Golem was a very frightening movie in the black and white, and then vampires with the typical Bela Lugosi style were very frightening, and then your zombies that walk really slow was really frightening. Today, Golem's a joke. He's a lovable character, or it's a giant walking clay statue who's worried about that. You just use the wire, cut off its head. It's no problem. Their interactions with these things are much different. And it's interesting how the zombie thing evolved eventually to be about really pharmaceuticals and creating the end of the world accidentally and or purposely so that an umbrella corporation can control everything. It's much more close to the problems that we have today rather than the innocent, experience of what is dead and what is alive that it was 100 years ago at the beginning of media entertainment, which we, by the way, let us not forget. Maybe we'll circle around to that in this call. I don't know. We still have to talk about the mimsicality of media. So anyways, so from a Mims perspective, definition here, as you can see on the screen, use of external to the body media to interact with one's own subconscious for recollection, utilities, etc. And this helps us to, apply external memory and memetics to objects beyond the home, which leads to strong resistance. So think of territorialness of of jobs, projects, and et cetera, things like that. So external memory from this perspective is not only the objects you store in your house, but also everything that's involved in your life that creates memory. I think it's the overall simple way of looking at external memory beyond the psychologist's definition. In the ether flexion wave, this is where I think Buddy's really coming from. The rippling of the external objects and devices in a mimetic manner in harmony with the instances or existences of an ethereal aspect within the person. Opens up influence to outside objects and the use of external medium devices like wands, dowsing rods, crystals, even photographs, guns, etc. So this object is resonating with you. And so there you're storing information with it, which could explain, by the way, why, let's say you're at a flea market. You've never seen any of the objects in that flea market, but you come across something and you want it so bad. It's almost like an old lover that you have to have it. If you don't buy it, if you find some reason, you're going to hurt for not buying that object because it should be with you. Then that's a very interesting phenomenon that I think no one talks about. Why is it that this used object somewhere? Now, it's obvious that that object is ingrained with either data that you stored in it from some other time, or more likely, someone else stored data in that object, and you are having a mimetic experience with that person's. You're resonating with that person. You don't even know them, but that object now contains the information, which creates a whimsical membrane with that individual, which you may be your previous chum 200 years ago, or it might have been your lover in your last life, or it might be a long lost brother, or sister in this current life. So that's a very interesting phenomenon. Change theory, the appearance of external objects within your own cognitive focal point. So essentially the object here is, okay, I forget about, let's say, my favorite flashlight, and I don't find it for years. And when I find it, when I find that object, suddenly floods of memories come through me, feelings, alternate timelines, what would have happened, woulda, coulda, shouldas, that all come through. And then why did that object suddenly appear to you? Were you decluttering? And you were removing the clutter of life's modern memories out? Or did it shine to you because you needed it for that moment? So partial explanation for deja vus, and probably a direct explanation for the remembrance experiences, nostalgia, etc. Then you have the triple plane theory, which is obviously all about these quantum data streams. This is where it gets really interesting. The information applied on objects outside of self in the previous windows as you go backwards that leave a lossy trail of the memory. And some of them are more, they're lossy in an accelerated manner, and some of them can store a long, long time. Photographs are pretty well. Whereas, if you have a bunch of tapes, cassette tapes, those are going to definitely break down pretty quick, especially anything plastic related. So this might be able to explain psychokinesis, and of course, might have a lot to do with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So this is really getting into the quantum entanglement effects that are being proposed with these different quantum data streams, or as Jonathan calls, timelines. And then finally, of course, the Chinese STEM, where you have the interconnectivity of objects in time and space with the qi, jing, shen, and of course your your intellect, via your body, and that flow of energies in context of the changes at large, which is also called the E, and the Tao of moment to moment. And it creates an increase and decrease in your fortune and your luck and your karma. And it's a simultaneous measure of not only your fortune, but your karma and whether or not you have spiritual protection. And of course, that gets into the ether back again because of heaven's will. And the connection between the Chinese really were into this, the connection of heaven's will with the heaven's mandate. So Tian Yi, so again, Yi showing up, meaning literally the imposing force, the eyes that Buddy's talking about, and the feeling of love, the heaven's love, which is a Moist concept, not a Taoist concept. And then the other side of that being the heaven's mandate, your contract with your destiny, is so long as you're following your destiny, it's unfolding because you're Taoing. And if you're Taoing, your De is happening, and then you're not robbed, killed, get COVID and die, etc. And it keeps unfolding as it should, according to God's plan, Therefore, you have this contract or this lease on life, we say in our culture, this lease on life that enables us to keep going. So therefore, we become the golems or the avatars of God's experience on this earth, so long as we're behaving, and our free will therefore is confined to that experience. If we try to exert our free will and leave that behind, we take chances by becoming, quote, the peer of heaven, Chinese said, and therefore leave that protection, and who knows what could happen to you then. You are exposed to the elements. You have no angels. The demons are after you. The feeling that the evil eye is on you, the judgment, your sins catching up to you. You're breaking down, and the question is, oh my God, do you say, oh my God, and submit back to the Lord and get back on the track? And all those forces that are happening, the Chinese very succinctly, first of all, they decided everything is spiritual. Secondly, or related to at least Tao and Qi, which could be argued as spiritual. Or secondly, a very simple interaction of heaven's will and heaven's mandate. So very interesting, different ways of actually experiencing that. Of course, the martial artists, they were all about, could the strategist look at the city and see if it had a destiny of being taken, of being conquered? Was Troy about to be conquered or not? Would have saved a lot of lives. It was a very important thing for the art of war people. And then there's this general connection of feng shui to external memory, and that comes from other diagrammatica, the big G, the forces, etc. So I thought we would talk about these a little bit before going on to the chance encounter thing, because the chance encounter thing is very interesting. And then there's also a thought experiment that's in the paper that might be worth mentioning. So I know you guys have a lot of interactions from your own work, your own research on these different ways of looking at external memory. Go ahead.
Yeah, where to actually begin in terms of, for me, I looked at it from more of the human's physical response to any of these, Flexian waves or any kind of a physical wave. And these are hard to pinpoint, I think. I don't know. It's a tough one to actually, I think, prove out in any kind of real tangible sense. But it's not impossible. We're on the brink of being able to achieve that, physically in multiple ways. So
there's definitely a thought experiment in here about baseball that people should read up on page 8 that will give them some fair convincing. But you're right in terms of actually like a data technology that like Buddy wants to build. We don't have it. Yeah, we're far short. Or as I say later in the paper, we know only the sliver of the fleck of the scratching on the veneer of God's side table in his umpteenth mansion somewhere lost and dusty. And we just want to know the whole fleck. And because that will fulfill us much better than the sliver, apparently. We think. That's the hypothesis. We'll be happier if we have the whole fleck, even though it's not even into the table of wood. It's just the veneer, the varnish on top of the paint, on top of the table, and we'll get that little fleck. It's all important. And you get lots of awards, and you get famous as shit. You get groupies, whatever. Very important to us.
I honestly think, you look at these, the dimensionality type concept, and then you look at how, and this goes back to the E8 theory, and then the reduction down to quasi crystals into the 4D, and then obviously down to 3D. But it's projection. What we're experiencing here in our 3D is obviously an expression of what's occurring energetically in other places. Hypothetically, how do we all really truly? Like you said, it's a scratch of the surface of the surface.
Yeah.
So
that's the difficulty of it, isn't it?
Yeah, but I think the potential for us to be able to map out at least another section of understanding. We're right there on the door of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. If we listen to the buddies, and if we trust the Mims philosophy and not, some more tribalism and some more plunder economy and some neo-feudalism, is that led to so many good things, if you love slavery and and living in the Middle Ages. Yeah, great idea. But that's what the media wants us to do. I mean, how many shows about Vikings and bullshit like that do we need to see before we're convinced that it was a really dumb fucking time full of barbaric idiots? Now, did they have some smart ideas occasionally? Yeah, sure, of course they did. There was massive development during the Dark Ages, but it's still called the Dark Ages for a reason. And the external memory, but we still are obsessed with gathering trinkets and baubles and treasures because it does something to us, for us. It's charge-related information, and we better not discount it, because I think it's having a massive effect. I don't know if I don't know how to measure its differential effect versus, say, the psychology of cataclysmic, the cataclysmic, the mankind and amnesia. But clearly, not having resources during that time must have also affected the external memory thing. And why is it that every parent's obsession with getting rich, not necessarily only for themselves, but wanting to hand a pile of money to their kids, when we all are beginning to recognize it probably is just going to ruin that kid? Probably even the pursuit of it, and then ignoring your own child. In fact, Molly was telling me last night in the Robin Williams documentary, the saddest thing for her was seeing the effect on his son, where he had to go and entertain the world to feel moderately better, because he was in psychological suffering the entire time. A lot of comics are, and the son was being robbed of the father's beauty and brightness. I mean, that is so sad, and the effect that we still have so many young people of the little boy blue on the man on the moon, on account of the parents are chasing wealth purely for the acquisition of external memory baubles that you pile up, and they end up in the fucking garage anyways. And then all the old people are like, God, I gotta get rid of this shit. We're not managing our external memories very well, is my point, Jonathan. It's not feng shui. I think that might be the core actual problem of
I mean, maybe so. I think one of the main,
materialism.
Right now I'm reading Edith Hamilton, The Greek Way. Man, and just the first 2 chapters alone in that thing are just powerful. I mean, it's just really powerful writing. But her description of, the Greek methodology was basically, freedom. Ultimate freedom is freedom of thought and the ability to express those thoughts freely, objectively. And that's true freedom. And throughout all of the history of the Greek kind of history that we have available to us, written history, only 3 individuals were ever quote persecuted for their things they said or beliefs they held. And can you imagine how many, in comparison to the European and Western world, the Eastern, all the way Eastern world, anybody that believed differently than the systems were persecuted dramatically. And it's almost as if like that's a modern way of just doing things, is to persecute those who think differently. Whereas the Greeks encouraged it, and almost the concept of individuality of thought was what the pursuit of freedom and life was all about. Being able to divulge into freedom of thought and divulge into what that brings, and that in itself was an expression of life in itself, was thinking, and here we have so many programs running that are pressing forward on the way that we all need to think, and the lanes that we all need to exist. And if you ever exist outside of those lanes, then woe is you. You're either outcast from society, your friends or family, whatever. And I think that's something very important there, is that thought in itself should and always been what has defined freedom. Freedom is thought, and thought is freedom. And when we allow the baseline systems and the quote controllers to dictate that flow of thought, that's the problem. That's the issue underlying everything else. Nothing else matters until we have the ability to have free thought, unbiased free thought, and then express it however, in whichever direction we choose to do so, barring that it doesn't break the one rule that God put here for us all, which is, do unto others as I do to you. Treat your brother as your neighbor. You cannot do harm to others. But expressing a thought shouldn't harm other people. Talking about things and experiencing things, or having communion in terms of, I see things this way, man. Even if you don't agree, there should always be something to be learned from the exchange of these ideas, and that's the issue. We've had too much of our thought for too long being controlled and programmed and directed in certain ways. And when I say directed, I mean either through the release of information in a very propagandizing way, or number two, the control and the not control, but the hiding of information, the collective withholding of knowledge that we should be able to have in front of us, or at least explained properly. That even the withholding of knowledge,
Well,
to me,
if they can understand it after so many years of the mental drugs and the mental starvation and the mental abuse. So it's a good question whether or not that it might take 2 or 3 generations to actually, produce the progeneration that can actually, basically grasp this stuff. I mean, we're getting rarefied as it is, and now we're doing rarefied sciences and philosophy theater. We might be expecting too much. We might be expecting too much of these kids, even if all the fetters were let loose. And I don't think that the fetters are going to be let loose, Jonathan. I hate to be a naysayer, I really do, but I think that that's going to be up to nature and God directly. It's going to be, does God want to know himself without the lies of his darker aspect? And if he does, then he will loose the fetters himself, and all the stars and the Mother Earth. She herself will, being that external memory object of the life simulation object. She will make changes to the and it might be exactly what's happening now. Completely could be exactly what's happening now. The code change could be all about that. Or it might just be simply about charge. Or that's saying the same thing if the answer is spiritual. If the answer to all the Mimsical inquiries is spiritual, which is often when a lot of evangelicals, this is a battle of good and evil. Okay, maybe. And if that is true, then all these charge issues, love charge, sex charge, all these different charges will become they will become expressed, I think, the moment that Mother Nature and or God has had enough of lies and bullshit. And by bullshit, I mean, just again, hypocrisy, corruption, grift, literal human flesh industry. I mean, holy shit. Dude, everybody knows that especially mammals eating the same mammals, same species, creates prions, and prions attack the nerves. So there's an expressional relationship there. So, this Crucifield-Jacobs thing is incredible. And you know what? By the way, in 24, one of the major threats of the days, I think it was day 6 or 7, it was a Crucifield-Jacobs pathogen that was accelerated to kill you within a day or two. Now think of that. That was put out well before the obsession of the Q and the Pizzagate and all that stuff, right? It was put out there about the prions. And of course, Michael Crichton's where most people first interacted with the concept of prions through the mad cow and all that. But now we have this COVID situation where the guy who discovered AIDS is like, look, these mRNA vaccines might be creating prions. So it's here. I mean, if this is a battle of good and evil, and prions are a basic, even more basic than viral expression of good and evil because of how they attack the nervous system. I mean, we're really truly considering programs about good and evil. Now, we were talking about escaping it, though. I'm going to bring it back to the chance encounter. I don't know about you guys. I've been hiking before and actually been gotten confused, not lost, but just like, oh, I thought maybe I should have gone. How far back? And then you're stuck. Also, it's getting quiet. It's getting darker. You're getting a little worried, and then you have a chance encounter. I've also had moments where I was undecided about something, and really, frankly, may have been a little lost. Didn't have the I Ching, and out of that, ran into an old friend or ran into somebody who could give me an objective perspective, and you get that breath of fresh air moment. And I think that is another example of the external memory effect, but now through the feng shui perspective. If you're in certain places and the energies are converging in a certain sort of way, like this image here on the front, if the energies are they're converging in this a certain sort of way, the electrical effect and equivalent, or the spiritual effect and equivalent, is to give you this fresh escape and breath of fresh air with a new perspective that enables you to get out of that bad place and into a more open and openly aware kind of situation. And I think in a lot of ways, the more we can do to engineer these chance encounters, it's not something I cover in the paper, in how to engineer these chance encounters, but if we can figure out the conditions that lead to those chance encounters, aside from, of course, bad luck and chaos,